Well, I'll make it 10 o'clock, so we'll get underway. So welcome to everyone today to this meeting of the Infrastructure Committee. We've got in the room councillors Gleding, Cox, Tucker and Deputy Mayor Councillor Smith, and myself and General Manager Tony Avery to my right and Governance Support. Thank you here to my left. So welcome everyone, we'll get underway. We've got one apology today from Councillor Ferg, who's away in town. And we do have Chief Mayman, who's joining the meeting online for his item to present on the town centre parking restrictions. So we have a long move that Councillor Ferg's apology be accepted with seconder. Thank you, Councillor Tucker. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Right. Declarations of conflict of interest. Has anyone got anything to declare interest with? No. No. No, very good. Thank you. There are no matters lying on the table in previous meetings. And that brings us to the public forum. We've got 3 speakers today. First, each one has 3 minutes to speak, and if there's any time available, we'll want to ask some questions. The first speaker today is Brian Fitzpatrick from Remarkables Park Limited. Welcome, Brian. You just had a minute or 2 before the meeting started.
Thanks. So yes, I'm representing Remarkables Park, and we made a submission on the code of practice on subdivision and development, and you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to talk about the detail of the submission. I'm here to give a shout out to 2 staff members, Richard Powell and Sam Metcalf, for actually listening and working through the process in what I think was a really good way. We've made submissions on this document for years, and you've heard me in the past say this is the wrong forum to talk about the detail of those submissions. You can be 3 minutes and you've got a document that's hundreds of pages long, and we want to talk about details. And these guys finally listened, and I wasn't trying to exclude councillors. I said they could come to these meetings too, and they said, let's meet. We met for probably 10, 15 minutes, and we didn't agree on everything, but 90% we did. And I think they offered the opinion at the end that the document will be better for having been adjusted. So shout out to them.
Great.
Since I'm here, we've got traffic demand management on the agenda. Look, I want to say something about that too, if I may, please. Firstly, again, look at the positives in there. The document saying let's make more efficient use of transport infrastructure and emphasising the importance of that. Good on it. An opportunity to reduce transport emissions. Great. The 10-minute neighbourhood, fantastic. And then the hierarchy of users, fantastic. Right. But then I read this bit that says they interviewed 32 people. All of them were council staff. Yes, at 4.6, no elected members or community representatives were interviewed. Now, look, 32 people, that's good. That's not the number, but this is a certain view. And worse than that, there's comments in there saying that some of them were reluctant to make comment until they'd heard from their managers or senior managers about what it. If that's not code for don't mention project manager, I don't know what is, right? So I'm unhappy with that. But let's look at the positives. I've got a couple of pages, if I can just circulate them, please. You won't have to read much because it's all your own words, or all the words of the person who wrote the report. So nothing on that page other than the bit in yellow is what I want to talk about, so don't panic. Right, so if we, your document's gone through and looked at 23 different reports. All I'm going to do is focus on 3 of them. So if we look at the second panel down, page 38 in the long-term plan, and you'll see on the left-hand side, it says, this is your own document, said it needs strengthening. So I've added, my suggestion is to put in the words, evaluate the impact of relocating the civic and corporate functions from Queenstown CBD to Frankton and the effect this would have on travel to understand whether this would enable TDM. Now, don't be surprised at those words, because if you look in the middle column above, they're directly out of your own documents. I'm not trying to introduce anything new. I'm just saying, don't just put it in your spatial plan as it's proposed, but stick it in your long-term plan too. And the second one, I'm saying, if you look down in the middle column, just above my highlighting, strengthen, emphasising the role of council as major developer and provider of public services and facilities, and taking a leadership role in locating facilities, e.g. sports facilities, sports fields, libraries, in highly accessible locations. And all I'm suggesting is you add in civic facilities, including council offices, right? It'll strengthen your document. And the third one is your traffic demand management plan and your internal plan. You've heard me talk about this in the past, and I've asked this question of your staff many times before. all I'm saying is don't do a traffic demand or traffic management plan for your offices here in Queenstown. Do the counterfactual, look outside Queenstown and see what would the benefits be. So I'm saying do that comparison as well. And there's many more comments I could make on it, but I think there's three minor things you could put in would actually benefit the whole process and not detract at all from what the authors are saying.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and just on the last one, the one thing I should have added on that, traffic demand management, it's not just the staff coming to work, it's also all the driving that your staff do from work, right? Own documents say that 92% of the growth is happening in the southern corridor and in the eastern corridor. Well, all those building inspectors, every one of their visits to a site would be 16 kilometres shorter if it originated somewhere in Frankton. And that's just efficient use of your own vehicles and your own staff time.
Very good. Let's do that.
Time up.
5 seconds for a quick question, anyone?
Well, just to share the sentiment, I think 4 out of the 5 councillors here took over an hour and a half to get here, so definitely understand.
Yes, and in terms of who to interview, instead of just stand down on Frankton track in the morning, this document says you're looking for champions. There's people like myself who commute that track daily and actually would be glad to talk to you.
Thanks, Brian.
I've seen you on the track too.
Yes,
Thanks, Brian. Our next speaker is Steve Winter from Patterson's. So again, you've got 3 minutes. Any time question, if there's any afterwards.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Steve Winter. I'm also here to talk about the Land Development Subdivision Code of Practice update. I'm a principal at Patterson's in Queenstown. We're a firm of surveyors, engineers and planners working across Otago and Canterbury. A significant part of our workload is subdivision design for land development clients. The update proposes, the Land Development Subdivision Code of Practice update proposes an amendment on what constitutes a suitably qualified and experienced person. In the consultation phase, surveys with the relevant Survey and Spatial NZ certified professional land development engineer were generally included for large-scale civil design, road pavement and stormwater system design. In the revised version before the committee today, designs completed by engineering surveys will generally only be accepted for small-scale civil design. The red-letter wording in the section 1843 is proposed to be for small-scale civil design work, council will generally accept chartered professional engineers and Survey and Spatial New Zealand certified professional land development engineer qualifications. Large-scale civil design, complex civil design, or civil design related to the specific situations referenced below will need to be completed by a CPENG. We have the following issues with the amended wording. There's no guidance around what is small scale and what is large scale, nor where medium scale sits. It could be contended that small scale is only 2 to 5 lots or subdivision not involving a vested road. The subjective nature of the amended wording could cut land development surveyors out of one of our main areas of work without consultation. And there are wider issues that could be construed to be anti-competitive. Removing CPLD-Eng through this wording amounts to a de facto professional disqualification. Disqualification should only be done if the restriction is imposed is to be proven to be reasonably necessary, objectively justified and tested through consultation. The amended wording effectively abandons recognition of a nationally established certification without further consulting with Survey and Spatial NZ, previous submitters to the process or land development surveyors in the district. The wording will limit 10 to 20 plus years experienced land development surveyors to small scale subdivision and remove such experience and professional capacity from designing developments such as Shot Country, North Lake and Woodville Park. Our suggested wording is to remove the words for small scale civil design work and to remove the words large scale civil design. In this manner, council still has control over the more specialised areas noted further in the clause. Your consideration on the above would be greatly appreciated. We and Survey and Spatial NZ are available to discuss this item further with council. And I've added to the submission written form base documents that are affected in the submission, which appears to have triggered the change in the direction.
Thanks, Steve. Just quickly, did you receive much feedback from your submission? What did you?
None.
When you meet with the stuff?
None at all at our, no. So Patterson's didn't.
Okay, and can you just quickly summarise what, so the certified professional land development engineer is a professional qualification
Yes, it
run
is.
or
Yeah,
managed by Survey and Spatial NZ?
Yep, it's a new qualification. It's been running for a year now, so it's in its early days, but it was, there's a gambit of certifications across different parts of the survey profession. This one is to represent land development. And in response to, I guess, pressure to support the training that we get at university and the experience that we have.
Has there been some changes with, you know, registered surveyor titles over the years as well?
I think the registration is more geared towards general for the property rights side of surveying, and this certification has been established to directly belong to land development engineering.
Yeah, sorry, question. So if it's only been around for a year, how does someone who was qualified 10 or 20 years ago who's working in the profession get certified?
They just apply.
They just apply.
Yeah, they apply and go through a process of putting forward their experience, and then they're in the system for doing annual certification, CPD points, there's peer reviews, that sort of thing. So
Is there any obvious difference between the training that someone would receive today at university getting a qualification versus one that was 15 or 20 years ago?
there's a bit of streaming that happens at universities, so people can elect to go into that land development related field with engineering type papers, or they can go for cadastral stream type papers, or other.
So someone who's qualified this year from university wouldn't necessarily meet the certification.
They'll get the certification after several years.
Okay,
and
so they have to do it professional.
yeah, it's a professional extension to the university qualification.
All right, well, we've gone a little bit over time on that.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
And next up, we've got John Glover from organisation not specified today. Who are you representing today?
I'm representing myself, right? Yeah. Good morning, Chair, councillors. Just speaking to the first item on the agenda about the flood and the impacts on the roading network. A little bit confused because you've got a recommendation to sort of note and endorse the approach in the report, but within the report there's a few contradictions. So it says there's 1.92 million still to spend to complete the works, and so because that's readily available, can be added to debt as emergency works, and the network will be restored, so there's no change to risk and there's no change of level of service. But the report also suggests that they won't spend any more money to complete the works on the Kinloch Road. So at the moment, those of you that don't know, when that road washed out, the farm owner next door kindly allowed council to build a temporary road through the paddock. But that is there, as long as the farmer's happy for it to be there. So, so there's a significant risk that if you don't reinstate the road, that there will be a change in level of service. And you can't just say that, well, because there's a road there and he's happy for it to be there at the moment, it's all good. So there's just that contradiction. The report says that there's no proposal to spend money to reinstate Kinloch Road, but further down the report it says the level of service is maintained and the works will be done. So just I'm not sure why that is there. And we probably those that live there and the 300 or so movie crew with Brad and his team are travelling up and down every day at the moment. There's a need for access, and it needs to be sort of guaranteed into the future. So if council's position is it's not going to reinstate the legal road, then you need to recognise that is a change to a level of service, because you haven't got a guaranteed road, and it is a risk, and that needs to be reflected. So the report is contradicting. I mean, answer any questions you have on that. But just on the trouble management program, and there's somebody that spent quite a bit of time a few years ago with the chamber looking to establish a TMA in the area. You know, one of the key things is how do you influence behaviour? Really, really hard to get people out of cars. And the report says that pricing of car parking is absolutely key. It's one of the few tools you have. And yet, you know, you're going to agree to not charge for any of the car parks after 6 o'clock on Ballarat Street. I mean, to me, that's crazy. It's, you know, you've spent all that money making car parks, and just to say we're going to have them for free. All it does is a bit like, you know, leaving cans of beer outside an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and you're losing income that you could use to fund some of these other schemes. You know, there is no money in the, you know, for better off, that's all gone, so there's no money for doing any of this stuff that will get people out of cars. So getting some money from parking is one of the few things you could do, and I'm just at a loss to see why you would have everything free at the 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. We're just over the time, but no questions.
Just one brief one. Is the physical formation at Kinloch now at a sufficient level of service if you take the property side away?
It's a bit skinny, but yeah, it's doing the job.
Okay. So is it fair to say there'd be two approaches? You either resolve the property issue or you reinstate the road?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
And maybe just in terms of the rest of the roads,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on where that's at? Is it just this one piece that's a major issue? Or
Yeah, I mean, it ended up a lot worse than it needed to be, but we won't go back through that. There's been a lot of investment by council since 2016, which has really, you know, every time there's been gravel come out from the Breeze Bridge that raised the section of the road, that's due to happen again, I believe, in the coming year. So that sort of progressively identifying where the river has been approaching the road and rock arming it just in time has been very successful. You know, I've had a little bit that's got wet for a couple of days, but the works that council have done have really sort of made a huge difference. And that was the strategy that was presented by Geosol back in 2016, which council commissioned. And that was the approach that they looked at, rerouting the road, you know, getting a ferry, doing a bridge, and the sort of localized intervention was recommended as the approach, and it's worked really well today.
thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sean. Thanks. Right, next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the agenda. I'll move that the agenda be confirmed without additional alteration. Second that. Thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And we've got the confirmation of the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 28th of November 2024. The resolution that the minutes of that meeting be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Happy to-
I'll move. Oh, you want to move it? Second it?
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, we do have actually, there is a minor change to that. The minutes have been updated to show that every item was carried unanimously, each one. For some reason that line was left off the end of the resolution. So
For consistency to the wording in the motion. One, you normally say motion of Councillor Ladding and Councillor Cox. And then when you go and say Councillor Ladding and seconded by Councillor Ferguson, you take it down, you second it, and you don't think just for consistency.
okay. So,
Editorial only.
so removing the term seconded on the motion in the resolution paragraph, and add the addition of the line to say that each resolution is carried. So we'll move then that the minutes be confirmed as a true record with those alterations. Mover and seconder. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. Right, so that brings us to item 1, which is covering the September-October 2024 weather event. I'd like to invite Ben Greenwood to the table. The author of the report will be presenting it to us. The purpose of the report, I'll just state here, is to provide an update on the impacts, repairs required and costs associated with the September, October 2024 wet weather event. I'll hand over to you, Ben. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is probably the first report of this nature that we've brought to council, based on the time I've been here. And we've done so because of the unusually high dollar value of work due to the amount of damage that the network sustained. And so we're looking at somewhere in the order of 1.9 million. And the purpose of the report was to essentially to provide an update of the work in progress and the estimated cost to complete. Welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Could you, through the chair, could you, at para 4 there, can you just explain a bit more about where we're actually sitting with the NZTA funding for resilience? And I understood that in the readjustment, they reduced budgets here, but I thought on the resilience, we were still doing okay.
Yes. So with the resilience, that's a separate item to the emergency reinstatement.
Oh, okay.
So we still have resilience funded works, which includes Crown Range and Glenorchy Road projects.
Yeah.
But this is a different piece of work. So the potential funding that we can get from NZTA for this is an emergency works funding submission. And we have made a submission and we're waiting to hear back.
We haven't had any response.
We've had some positive engagement, but we haven't had an outcome.
Okay. Thank you.
What would the likelihood of that funding be from securing it? Is it TA funding at this point?
I
You've
don't
no idea.
put it in the accounts,
Okay.
but
Yeah, it was quite confronting reading some of the ones, but probably more extensive than I'd ever anticipated. Some of the Crown Range cracks and slips and the charred road and things. I wasn't even aware that that was a problem in the charred road. So you sort of lay out some options there. So can you just tell me a bit more about charred road and what's you're planning on doing there?
yeah, so Charlotte Road, we have actually done the work already, and we've accelerated that to ensure that the heavy vehicle restriction that was in place over an area that dropped out can be lifted, and that work has been funded by the landowner as part of the need for them to obtain that access.
So when you say in the report, you say that one of the options was to talk with them about funding. That's actually
further progressed, and we have an agreement in place.
Right.
Then the work that we've done is a short to medium term repair though, and there's still vulnerability in that section of Shard Road, so it's not complete and closed. We still need to revisit as part of a longer term strategy around some of these Shard Road.
these low volume remote, and the Shard Road's not particularly remote, but I'm thinking back to the Hunter Valley station problem we had. Has that one ever been resolved properly?
It has, there's an update actually on that, but it's not fully resolved. So the routine monitoring that we've been doing on that road still needs to be done, but we're looking at changing the methodology for the monitoring. So the risk is not resolved. There's still an area of vulnerable road formation, but it was something like $2 million. Order of magnitude retaining wall.
Disproportionate to the use, yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at changing the approach. I'm going to come back actually to the committee or the council with an update on that actually, maybe by a workshop. I've just got to see which means to report that through.
you have a copy of something to read?
Yes, pick on that. So Ben and I, and then you read out on the Valley Station a few weeks ago, a bit longer, and looked at the current trigger point. We think that we made a different approach to that, so we'll come back and talk about that.
Yep.
But we're also looking at the potential of doing a report on the low volume, just strategic roads, for which we've got a number that have quite a high cost of maintenance and how do we approach those. So no decision about that, but there's been 2 roads mentioned today, 3.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
the
4
branches is on here and the,
branches.
I mean, we've recently had submissions about Macetown as well, and I'm not completely sure to the extent to which that's a paper road or a public road.
It's not a paper road and it's not a public road.
Okay, right. So, I mean, there's some,
Really?
those right ones, given the proportion of costs relative to their use, they're quite tricky, and, you know, this is, evident in this report that it's not the big roads that are costing the most necessarily, so.
And so we'll be looking to try and bring a report along that talks about those roads.
Yeah.
Costs of maintenance and what the options might not be to daylights that.
Okay.
Last of my question, I'm wondering if I'm going to take your question.
Go for it.
I was just wondering if you can, just elaborate on the approach to the road towards Glenorchy. To John's point, in terms of the approach that council's taken and what the direction from here is. given
So
the
this is for Kinloch Road.
Kinloch Road.
So there was basically a big chunk taken out, as we're all aware, of the original road formation. And River's just come in and taken a chunk of around 100 metres long out of the road. And the cost to reinstate the road on its current alignment would be far greater than the gravel track that's been formed as a kind of an emergency response to get the road back in operational start. Very valid points raised that leaves us vulnerable to the landowner and their concerns around having a road on their land. I haven't personally been involved in discussions, and at this stage, the nature of what we're doing is looking to restore, reinstate access back as BAU. And in the report, there's a budget for outstanding works for Kinloch Road that haven't been expended and won't be expended. Unless we need to. And at the moment, further rock armouring, realignment of that on its current formation is we're seeking to avoid that if we can, while we look at the more strategic approach. As mentioned, Kinloch Road's one of those roads, one of those remote rural roads that need decisions to be made around the strategy before we spend huge amounts of money on bit by bit. Responding to issues and events.
So can we expect to be consulted? Can the landowners and the other sort of community members expect to be consulted with the future of the approach to what we're going to do?
Absolutely. I think the impact of any report that comes back around remote roads needs each individual road considered for its own merits, that each one has its own issues and risks and things to work through.
Cool. So just following on from Cody's question, so just going back to John's question, so you've got an additional $250,000 that would be required to do the rock armouring. Is that what you're suggesting, or to do additional work?
That is rock armouring of
Rock armouring.
that would be what's required.
Of the original road alignment.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so that'd be a written statement. So have we done
We don't have consent for that either, to go and do that.
No.
It's a very high level cost estimate at this stage that was put together with a week of the work happening. So I'd say there's big risk around that number growing too.
just running to that discussion we had with John Glover, that
you know, have we done any balance of, you know, what would it cost to acquire that piece of land to legitimise that
At this stage.
road versus the work that's required or something like that?
No, not at the moment. This is a report about the immediate reality, but that is a bit of work that needs to be done because there's a fundamental question whether we continue to maintain the road in its current spot, which is on someone else's land.
Yeah.
Whether we rebuild it, do we go back to the landowner and see another alternative route? All of those things are valid. We haven't done the work yet, but we will need to. And I think so before we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, we need to be certain of that strategy and approach. But that's going to take some time. It's not a quick answer that.
But that's within the scope of your approach here to sort of work through those eventually.
Well, being said, talking about the immediate
Yeah.
response, it'll be in the space, looking at the work at
Other
the
work,
strategic level,
Okay.
infrastructure planning level, about how do we respond. And I think this will be part of consideration of the other low volume strategic, what I call strategic projects I've talked about, because they all raise similar issues.
Yeah, it would be helpful to have some sort of time frame on the strategic piece and then the follow-on pieces, just maybe at the next infrastructure workshop might be the way to do it, just to get a better understanding of what we're looking at. Time.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Just going to the Vaughan Road, because interestingly, that's in a state that the Kinloch Road was in, by the looks of it, just before it got washed away. And I know Kinloch, you know, Don had made some noises about putting rocks in quickly before it got taken out completely. And of course, that wasn't done. And we've lost the road. So with Vaughan, is there a different approach? Have we protected that since the report was written?
We haven't yet, but the work's arranged and underway. And so we haven't done the work yet. The work that's on the report is for some basically two options: a rock armoured approach or a alternative that has higher risk. But,
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we have some sort of strategy in the team so that when something is urgent, you know, fix it or lose it? Do we have some sort of processes to prioritise that and act quickly so that we don't end up in a situation where we've got a $500,000 million, $2 million fix on our hands, which, you know, could appear like we strategically left it so that we lost the road. And I am concerned about that.
I'm not aware of that issue that you're speaking to now.
Yeah, no.
I need to carry that discussion on, Nikki, but
Yeah.
I don't quite understand.
Well, if you're about to lose a road and we know we've just lost one because we didn't quickly armour it. So I'm just concerned that
The time frame is for the river to rise after a rain event and to put the rocks in. Don't, you know what I mean? Like if we needed to
explain that.
respond to a rain event and put the rocks in as the rain event was unfolding, that's not.
No, what I'm talking about is responding now before any rain event. So it's dry.
So again,
Do we have some sort of process? Because I am concerned that we leave things and then they get worse and then the costs rise.
So give the same response. We're going to do a bit of work on those low volume fragile roads. We don't have, I mean, armouring Kinloch Road, for example, would be an LTP decision.
I'm talking about the Vaughan, and I'm talking about specific situations where there is imminent risk to that piece of road if we don't act quickly.
Right.
Are you going, question, we're doing a strategic piece of work. Is the plan to wait until that piece of strategic work is done before we armour the Vaughan?
You're assuming that armouring the Vaughan is the answer to whatever the problem is. I don't know the answer to.
Do you know if it's not? Like,
I
have you
don't
done
know.
the
No, I
work?
don't know the answer to the question of the Vaughan. I'm not. We can't answer that now. We'll come back to you about that. I don't know the situation with the Vaughan right now.
Well, I think we should, and I think.
So I don't know it because you've just raised it now. Well, I'll ask the team, but I'm also not prepared to have the team respond on the fly until we've done some work around that. So we will come back to you about the Vaughan in particular, but no, we don't have. If there's a critical emergency rising, then we will have to respond to that. But we've still got to make a decision around, do we prioritise expenditure on that road against everything else? Because we've got budget constraints. Work that's flagged in this report for the Vaughan Road has been approved to proceed to do some remediation work to the flood damage that we have just incurred. But I think that's in this report. It's a response to the issue that happened. And that's slightly different to the question you're asking, which is what are we doing about that up front before the event happens?
I think that's,
And I, sorry,
I think that's the difference between resilience versus emergency. Emergency is this is what we've got, resilience is reinforcing things that we know are problematic, which in this report does have stuff on the ground range we know could be a problem. So I do see that there is sentiment and ability to be proactive through resilience funding that, you know, is outside of this scope. This is looking at what's already happened and how to manage from here. That's at least how I understand it. But
well, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that, look, yes, we should be proactive, but if we, you know, prioritising which things we're proactive on is the difficult thing, because there are literally hundreds or thousands of slips and potential risks that we see around the district, and you can't just go, that might, if we don't do anything, that might go, because that could apply to 1,000 situations, and we just can't do all of them. I mean, we just simply, and you know, so while I've got some sympathy to being proactive, I just can't see how that can practically be the case, that you can solve every problem proactively on the assumption that there's a probability it might happen. It's just not feasible.
I think there's a strategic piece that we need to do,
Oh,
looking at.
We're doing.
If there is imminent risk,
I said,
Is
we're
it-
not gonna do it.
no, not to the, I'm not talking about those low roads, I'm talking about just in general, if there's a piece of work that can be done at relatively low cost to prevent something that's much more costly, and I don't know how, you know, we'd have to, there's a prioritization, obviously, but let's not say it's impossible just because we've got so many things.
So-
Anyway, look, it's question time and I do have a couple more questions. Just clarify, had that NZTA claim, has that been made?
Yeah, the claim's been made, but we haven't had advice of whether it's been approved or not.
Yeah, no, that's fine, thanks, I just wanted to check. And just look in the report, you're asking us to note it. And there's a paragraph in here that says, further works beyond the initial response are unlikely to progress on Kinloch Road or Vaughan Road. And that concerns me, and it concerns me in light of the comments that have just been made. It feels like that statement's being made ahead of a wider strategy, and that,
Yeah, so I guess that to clarify that, that's further response works to the emergency, not to the
Okay.
strategic discussion. So there's currently a road there and we're not planning to do any more because we've reinstated the road. Under the emergency. Under the emergency scope of this report, but we do need to have the strategic piece come
Okay.
forward there.
that's great. And sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to ask you. It's just gone from my head. Oh, yeah. So just, there was some suggestion that if we had declared a local state of emergency when that flood occurred, when access was cut off and we had people down Fincombe and cars stuck and a car float away and so on and so forth, that there may have been some funding under which act would it have been? Civil Defence Emergency Management Act? I don't know. Have we looked, no, I'm just wondering, given the cost of this, have we looked into whether our response to declaring emergencies or not, what impact that might have on our ability to claim?
So maybe that's one for Ben, that's one for me.
Okay.
This didn't even get close to the threshold of being declared emergency. The reasons for declaring are when, in broad sense, when the agencies are unable to deal with the event that's in front of them. That's not the situation at all. I don't believe there'd be any basis for declaring it as emergency and successfully getting any funding from that. It didn't even get close to that threshold.
I'm just asking the question
but
whether that's been.
That's my answer to that question.
Okay,
That's all I have for questions.
right.
Oh, sorry, and there is just one error. It looks like an error on page 36 or 22 of the report itself. Looks like the Rees Valley piece hasn't been, you've swapped it out for the boulder incident that occurred on one of the other roads. So there just wasn't, I didn't see that there was any information about the Rees Valley,
Page was that?
or maybe it was just in the wrong spot. Sorry, 36 of the agenda.
It's the Motatapu Road.
Yeah, so you've got large rock and rockfall blocking road and teams respond, but that's talking about Hensman
Oh,
Road.
sorry, the Rees Road.
Does that make sense? I'm just wondering what happened to the commentary on the Rees Valley Road. Is that,
So T3 Linsman Road is up there.
And then you've got it repeated under Hensman Road.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, no big, but I just, yeah.
Thanks, Nikki.
Okay, not much from me. The report itself of the damage on the roads was prepared in December. There's a table of expenditure so far and in the agenda report. And expenditure still to come. Is that, how current is that? Is that?
So that's
More
current at the time that this report was prepared, so it has moved on since then.
A week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
I would say roughly the estimate is closer to 800 to 900K incurred at the moment.
Yeah.
And the big ticket item is still remaining the crown range.
Yeah.
And a lot of that work requires anchoring and mesh or shotcrete or other type solutions to repair slumps and other items, and that's all progressing through design at the moment, with the view that it will be constructed within the next couple of months. So we're looking at completion of this within, I would say, 2 to 3 months.
Right. Of all of this.
Of all the work within the report.
Yeah. Okay. There's a comment there about the Shard Farm Road and the ability for the owner who's most affected by that to contribute to it. Is that a type of arrangement considered for any other work around particularly on these roads, I guess, where they are servicing a limited number of people, or is it, it's a bit of a one?
It's a bit of a one, it's no other access to anything else down there, so it's really a discrete agreement with the landowner who is the primary beneficiary of the work.
Okay. I guess the one that sprung to mind was, what happens with the Branches Road when there's mostly one property at the end of it. Also, does this, speaking of the Branches Road, at the point that the December report was written, there hadn't been much access and beyond a certain point of the road. But does this current table of expenditure include more than what was originally reported on in December? Beyond?
I don't know the answer to that question. The estimate versus the actuals is not something I've checked yet. For individual specific roads, but my understanding generally of Branches and Skippers was there was no major unusual works there. It was sort of typical just about every time it rains heavily in those areas where you slips and slumps and the grader needs to go in and clear those roads, and it was quite typical of what we usually get. There were no retaining walls or anything else.
The road was obviously passable in time for the Branches camp in December, so
I believe only just.
Yeah, that was able to be done in that time frame, so you can only spend so much money in a few weeks here. Typically with a machine. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I think that's how you caught me out a little bit with the photo on the front of the December report. It had a new backdrop behind the Camelot Road. I thought, well, that's interesting. Yeah, it's almost seamless. Together. A bit of photoshopping. Skippers Road or whatever it is behind Camelot. But and I think we've brought this point up before too, where because this particular event, the expenditure was so much greater than you've normally seen in a typical year or an average year over the last 5 years. And the question comes up from time to time about, should we be building up a reserve of money to be able to spend on these things? But the response was that then you're rating people, potentially rating people too highly. If something doesn't happen, you're not spending the money. And I guess the way we operate is we have the ability to shift money around and borrow with our headroom that we keep in reserve, and then pay that back by rating after the event.
We just have to make sure that we schedule our natural disasters far enough apart.
Yeah, that's right. Trouble is, they seem to be done more and more frequently.
Can I ask one more question?
One more.
Just on that, the debt funding, do you have any idea how they pay that back? Because if we keep doing that, obviously, future generations are going to end up paying for the.
My name is
So
Peter.
do we?
He's my finance team.
Oh, that'd be great.
We've been sitting at the back waiting for that very question.
Right. It'd just be good to know if we plan to ring fence that debt and pay it off over
Like most of our debt, we sign up for either 5 or 6 years. We obviously don't pay it off in that time. We do reassess at the end of the term. If we do have additional money to pay some of the debt off, otherwise it does get refinanced.
Right, okay, so my concern is that if we keep continuing with this approach of debt funding, it just falls on future generations, going to get more and more expensive. We should be, you know, if we're going to do that, we should be looking at, I don't know. I don't know how you work it. Maybe lower rates and paying it off. I just think we have to pay it off quicker, if we're going to take that approach.
And I think there's a lot of rental cars using the roads as well who aren't ratepayers, and it does seem strange that, you know, the Crown Range went from 90% funded to NZTA to 50. I don't know what the history of that was, but the tax reform is definitely a key part of that for future conversations.
Yeah, is there I mean, if councillors wanted to, would there be a way of looking at it so that when we do the annual plans, we make sure that that maintenance work is ring fenced and paid off within a year, 2 years, the following year, so that it's captured in the here and now when it's supposed to be. Otherwise, we're really not meeting our operating, we're not balancing the budget as we're supposed to.
Look, in one of the council workshops with a month or two ago, we did discuss, it was one of the slides we had up there, that it was a year 3 option we were going to look at. Do we need to start putting a budget aside for these minor emergency events? But we were waiting for this paper to get able to get some background information. But we do have a bit of a base now of what we've spent, I suppose, over the last 5 years. It's a decision that, yeah.
So that would be one way is rating it in front, but the other way would be putting it on debt, but then paying it off that next annual plan year.
You got
And
to
then
understand the
we cannot
implications of that
take too much.
over the whole program, over the whole operational program. So it's not just a simple thing and I'll pay this off quickly because it may have more impact here. So yeah, it's a balancing act.
We'll have to balance the budget. That's
Yeah,
all.
we've got other activities going on too. We just bring in toll roads.
It's,
Be good to look at options.
it's
Toll roads, that's in the strategic plan.
a
We
bit
should
of
be
a push
looking
and
at
pull,
toll
so it's slightly academic as to whether the, you know, that paying off this debt faster means you pay off something else slower or whatever, and it's just all, it's slightly academic, it's a big pool of debt, and it's,
It's not really, I completely disagree with that. You know, it's a maintenance cost.
So, sorry, this is a finance question, so you might
Yeah.
deal with it there.
Yeah.
Including to the annual plan budget process.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you both.
Thanks.
So the resolution then before us is that the infrastructure committee note the contents of this report and to endorse the approach to continue with the works to reinstate the roading network. We have a mover. Ready in a seconder.
Just want to say a couple of things. Very quickly. I just, look, this is to endorse the approach to continue with works to reinstate the roading network, but in effect, we haven't actually reinstated that Kinloch. What we've done is got some sort of temporary fix that is highly at risk depending on what the landowner decides to do. So I will agree, but I'm struggling with this sort of assumption that we are reinstating. And I'm concerned with some of these low volume roads. I don't want us to get ahead of the strategy work and let them fall into disrepair over time. We need to maintain them to the same level of service, same standard. Then we do the strategy work, we make a call. Yeah, thanks.
Any other vote?
Sorry.
Comments?
I support it as presented, but I agree that it's interesting, the work, strategic work you're talking about is going to be quite important to stop some of these roads. And I do seriously say, you know, we should be looking at the cost effectiveness of possibly tolling some of these roads. Using users pay the users, but maybe the usage is not high enough to warrant it, but it's something we should be looking at in the strategic approach.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you take the Mount Aspiring Road, for instance, and the vast majority of traffic on that road is a result of the tourism market and those people accessing, and obviously the government consulting on a user pays component. We've got the IBL and all these sort of things, but that's the sort of stuff that those things need to be contributing to ensure that the visitor industry is paying for the upkeep of the visitor assets. And so while I don't necessarily support tolling roads that you know, for the sake of tolling roads, there's a case on some, particularly some of those special use roads that they have a different funding strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, so well, I appreciate that the approach that staff have taken so far is reasonably practical and just to reiterate that keep the comms up and but I think the most part's been pragmatic and yeah, it's not a fun thing to deal with, so have some sympathy and appreciation for the work that you're doing, so thanks.
Right, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, item 2 is the Queenstown package proposed traffic control devices. I'd like to invite, we've got Lewis Grant, Minnie Clark. Oh, and Reese, thanks. Right, so Minnie, can you present the report? I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So the purpose of our report is to recommend the approval of the proposed traffic control devices for the Queenstown package. And is it okay if we take the report as read? And I've got Reese here with me today from the Alliance, who was involved in the design, to answer any specific design related queries. Yep, happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions?
So, Mr. Chair, can you just clarify that we've covered a lot of this before, haven't we? Or not?
We covered it before we went out to consultation.
Yep.
Okay.
So we already approved something in our consultation. This is now marrying up what's physically been put in place with these controls, making some tweaks, as I understand them, some changes to reflect those changes. So it's, I suppose, regularising what's in place now. Is that right, Reece?
Sort of, yeah, based on the feedback we've got through the consultation, there's proposed some changes around parking.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. I have no questions. Must be some questions. I've got a couple. Right. A couple of minor things. Firstly, there was a picture on page 79 that shows the Hanson Road, Joe O'Connell Drive intersection in terms of talking about who were consulted on that. That shows the combined intersection, but I'm pretty sure that you've already moved on to having that two split intersections. Yeah, I like the combined one better. I already told you that.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was just there purely to show us who you were consulting with around those bus
That was
routes.
for the consultation, so that before there was design changes.
That reflect the design of the intersection.
No.
The feedback you got predominantly related to parking, and a lot of them seem to relate to parking of the Grey Street car park. But that's sort of outside of it's not included or not part of the shaded areas of the drawings anyway, is it?
No,
It's
so
outside of the
that's
actual
outside the scope, and QLDC will be looking at that as part of our parking management strategy.
Yeah.
So we've taken some of the comments on board in the parking that is part of the scope.
Yeah.
But that larger car park's not part of it.
So that might be something that comes back to us separately at another meeting, maybe, if you like. Yeah. Because it seemed to be, there were a number of comments about that car park being available for shorter term parking to help the people to access the shopping areas. There was a comment about access to 1080 Frankton Road. I wasn't sure I didn't look it up separately, but which property was 1080 Frankton Road, but
It's opposite McBride Street, so it's on Frankton Road. So.
it's sort of next to the driveway around the back of the terrace.
Yeah, so it's unrelated to the TCD. So we'll go back to the person.
There were also some comments about not being able to turn right at Grey Street to go towards Calvert Falls Bridge, but just the nature of the work and having to separate the lanes of traffic, isn't it? So,
That would not be a safe maneuver to do at all.
Yeah.
So that's why we
I
are.
understand it's a current method
Yep.
of travel, but things are going to change. So if you were coming out of Grey Street, you basically have to do a lap of the Frankton Village to get onto McBride Street again and heads out that way. There's no
Oh,
roundabout.
there's no roundabout.
That's the whole point.
No, you're gonna go for it.
You missed that, but
You know, roundabouts
Sorry,
going.
that's where my head went to.
do a U-turn in the middle of the traffic lights. So.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's a good point.
But I think we have the same thing anytime there's, you know, median strips and no right turn, that's, you know, you can come out of the car park here, you can't turn.
There are
right.
certain
No.
questions around the overall design of feeding, which is
Yeah.
beyond the scope of this. This is just
That's right.
putting in place those signages and markings that's associated with them.
Yeah.
So,
So we will respond to the submitters on all their questions.
Right. If you haven't done that yet, but you will do.
We've gone back and said, look, we've got to go through this process here and we'll come back to the
Okay.
responses on all.
So pages 106 and 107, they show for options 3 and 4. They show the new P30, new P60, and then a new P10 or P60 and a new P60. It was a bit hard to see exactly where they're related to, but I think it's the block of parking outside the Somerville Pharmacy is one of them, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it really shows it. And then also on Grey Street.
Yeah.
Just those squares.
Yeah, just those squares. So the rest will maintain P 120 and then those will be either P30 or P60,
Depending on those,
depending on,
which option we go for. And is the option we're considering is option 3, isn't it? That's the one that's been put forward as the
Yeah.
recommended option. So that would be attachment C with the P30s. Maybe it's my colour deficient vision might be letting me down, but
it's not really clear.
which is the distinction? Where's P30 and
So,
where's P60?
so P30 would be on Grey Street
Right,
and the P60 would be inside the centre park.
right, okay. Okay. Very good. And the other question I had was on page 95. It's a plan, I think, that shows different markings. Where is it? 5. So yeah, shows Joe O'Connell Drive and Frankton, or the Ladies Mile Road. It's got advanced cycle stop boxes on Joe O'Connell Drive and on the lane towards Queenstown. It doesn't have anything on the lane coming out of Frankton. There is a cycle path, obviously, as well, or shared path. But, you know, further back towards the BP station, there is a cycle lane on the road, which sort of merges into the bus lane. Is the intention that cycles and buses will share the bus lane? Yeah. Okay. So, you know, so the bus lane shown on these is red, but it'll be green in practice anyway. That becomes the advanced cycle stop box potentially as well.
Essentially, yeah.
Will there be a box physically in front of where the buses would stop? Or not?
No, there won't.
No. Okay. There would just be cyclists and buses jostling each other. Buses might win.
Probably not.
Hopefully not. Yeah. Okay. That was everything I had, I think. Yeah. So, no other questions?
So just for a quick, in the final option 3, one of the comments was to remove cycle lanes on Grey and McBride Street. In that option 3 diagram on page 106, are those lanes? I can't even see. It's hard to see any cycle lanes. Yeah.
So we haven't taken that into consideration in any of our options because that won't achieve the objectives of the overall project.
Okay.
So we,
Right.
yeah, we didn't think that that was an option to remove the cycle lanes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it is hard to see on 106, but all of Grey Street is a sort of a
Yeah.
shared cycle
Um,
road, isn't it? A shared space.
There is, but towards oh no, actually, sorry, Grey Street is, yeah, it's a
Grey
shared,
Street,
yeah.
Cowatta Road, yeah, and then
Oh.
there are cycle lanes on that section of McBride Street as well. You
Yeah.
can see them shaded in green on the bit between Frankton Road and.
Oh,
Grey
okay.
Street.
Yeah, I see. I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's the resolutions, but.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Stu. Thanks.
Okay, no other questions then. So the resolution we've got, thank you very much. Is that the Infrastructure Committee note the contents of this report and approve the proposed changes to traffic control devices and parking as described in option 3 of this report for the Stairway 6A, Frankton intersection bus hub improvements that form part of the wider Queenstown package as it relates to the QLDC traffic and parking bylaw 2018. Go move it.
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seconder. Nikki. Now, I think in our standing orders, the mover actually gets the right to speak first to the motion if he or she would like to, and then a right of reply.
I'm happy to go with what we've got, but nothing further.
Anyone else want to say that?
Well, I just wanted to signal, I think I abstained last time because and I probably will again today because I just find it slightly inane that we're involved in something that we have absolutely no control over. As a delivery of the Queenstown package project, so I don't really understand why we have, I don't know, I understand why we have a role, I just don't think it makes any sense because we don't have any control.
I think because it falls under our bylaw.
I know, and that's why I understand that we technically do. I just think it's a nonsense that this should have been part of the alliance package and should have been delegated to someone to make the decisions on because it's not within our purview.
I can give the same response as I gave last time, but it's the same response, so yeah.
It's like my response.
It's like going already. Right, no other comment? All in favour? Anyone abstaining? No one against that? Just abstaining. Carried.
Now, in advance of the next report, I should have said, the thing that I said about this regularised Watson was actually about this paper, not the paper that recently just came up with it, so I got out of sync.
Yeah, that's good.
Too many reports.
Yeah.
Keep us. And so,
400 pages and everything.
Right, so the next item, item 3, is Queenstown Town Centre parking restrictions. We've got Jeff Mayman has joined us online. We're sitting there waiting patiently. So thank you, Jeff. I'll hand over to you and Tony to present the report.
Yeah. Good morning, councillors. But the purpose of this paper is to approve our parking restrictions, the new ones that have come through from the Queenstown Street upgrades, and reapprove the relevant ones from the 2021 restrictions. And the approach we've taken is to and kept the all changes that worked out the most efficient way was to rescind the 2021 and reissue the full parking restrictions based on the as is. So that is the proposal before you.
You? Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Can you just explain the parks up Brecon Street near the cemetery and iFly and stuff? Are they paid parks or are they just time limited 240s on up at Brecon Street?
Apologies, Quinton, I don't have that information on me.
sorry, Sarah, back.
Yeah, they're paid parks.
They're paid parks, okay. And is there a reason why we chose 240s there? It just seems to be out of step. So, I mean, if someone was staying for 240, would for 4 hours and to go up Skyline and go do whatever, would prefer they were using the Skyline car park or the Lakeview car park. And that these parks really should be reserved for people who, you know, are visiting, having lunch in the iFly building or, you know, circulating for, not the iFly building, but whatever the one, you know, going 10-pin bowling for an hour and a half or whatever. It just seems to be counterproductive that their 240s are not, say, 120s, for instance,
Yeah.
given that we should be using this to actually encourage people to park in the right places.
Yeah.
And that same question. But it's not part of the changes.
No, not part of the change. 240s were the original scope and then we changed.
That's for the future.
Well, can we change them?
Yeah, they never came to us in the first place. This is retrospective, right? We have.
So can I come to the table?
They were approved in the 2021 paper.
Oh, they were. Okay, great, thank you.
So this is put in place, the current arrangements, yeah, as we are due to come back to at some point with a
Right.
parking plan for the broader area, and I'd expect it would cover this sort of issue there.
Okay.
In terms of how we allow car parking.
But there was no.
Okay, so there is, which brings us back to the point that these parking management strategies that we're waiting on are an important piece of work that should be informing what we're doing here, and it seems to be a bit out of step now.
This, as we're trying to say, this is, I suppose, putting in place, reflecting what's been put in place, because we need to be able to do that to enforce what's there. it's not attempting to revisit that. If we
Okay,
revisit,
right.
then we can come back to that.
Okay, that's fine. So, and just to clarify, Reese and Beach Street, there are 4 mobility parks within the share space up there, is that right?
The whole of Racing Beach Mobility Park.
I can drive in it with my mobility pass and park anywhere on Beach and Reese Street.
So, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, so that red, that's a good point. So that red line meant, oh, I see.
So,
So loading zone's the same. You
Yeah, I
got,
didn't understand that.
so what signage is in place or education's in place to show what mobility permits enable there?
Map on the QLDC website where you can, all mobility parks are visible.
But if you're driving down.
But if
Reese or
I
Beach,
could park anywhere there, including Upper Beach Street by the looks of it, which is
Only from Cow Lane.
only from Cow Lane down there. And is there a time limit on mobility parking in those areas? No, I can park in the middle of Beach Street all day long, which is great. It's a mobility pass holder, but I'm just a little bit
not
surprised.
sure about the middle of the street.
Well, within the shared space, but anyway, I'm just, I don't know how a mobility user would know that. As someone who's often in Queenstown and a mobility pass holder, I don't know that. So is there signage of Shotover Street or come out of Cow Lane or going to Lower Beach Street or anything that informs people that that mobility park's available?
Not that I can remember, I'll just double check, but we have been putting out columns around mobility parking. That the map is there to help people decide where they can and can't park.
All right, that's, I think we should do some work to sign or educate on that, because I think it's. Yeah, well, particularly there's a Mark Bay and you rely on that, I don't know, turning off Shotover Street, I don't have any reason to believe that I could park there with a mobility bus, so. But I've solved all my parking problems in Queenstown, so thank you.
So there is no parking for taxis down that loading zone?
There is PSV parking, they can stop and drop off, they can't.
They can't sit there. Yeah, that's great. So look, I don't know why I haven't got my head around it, but you're saying we need to approve this so that we can enforce, but you were also saying that's been in place that way when we were talking about the 240 parks since December 21.
So in 2021, the construction plans were approved.
Yeah.
And what was built hasn't quite matched the construction plans, things have changed slightly. So we're just making sure that
So we never had approved these in a meeting. We never under the
No.
model.
My understanding was there was an approved layout, and this is dealing with some changes from what was previously approved, what's now been put in place to make sure that those two match up, because since that period, there have been some changes in terms of that layout.
So I guess
Those pictures tell us
yeah.
what changes are.
Just in terms of the function of this committee, it would be good to make sure that we approve things not years retrospectively.
So
But
my understanding, perhaps Jeff can help.
Yeah.
This isn't a retrospective approval for something that's years in place. There was something that was approved that approved the layout. This is now coming back and going, there's been some changes to that we need to recognise.
yeah, exactly. There have been changes that we
So it's a timing thing around making sure we put all those things in place that have now given rise to this.
But it would be good if this committee could approve things ahead of time so that we can make sure that we put, like, for example, if there's, if there are changes to things, that's the function of the committee and the bylaw requires it, was my understanding. So look, where we're at is where we're at, but we need to be able to make decisions about things proactively rather than just approving what's happened. No comments on that?
It's a process.
I think we can, yeah, I think we can acknowledge that, Nikki, and I guess just the scale of these, and look, to be fair, we're going to have a similar conversation with Lakeview in the next meeting or two, and Arterial as well.
So yeah, look, just so that the package is right, because we hear comments from the community about loading zones and getting ticketed and all of these things. This is our role. And so if we can do it up front and have the opportunity to change things, even workshop things and make sure we get it right, that would be really helpful, rather than just approving. Thank you. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds. The other thing was, you've said we need to rescind, but the recommended motion doesn't suggest we rescind anything. It's just got approval. I don't know if that's an issue or not, but do you want us to officially rescind?
Was the intent. Apologies if that's not clear.
Sorry?
Yes, that was the intent, Nikki, and apologies if that's not clear.
No, it's fine. It's just, I don't know if you technically need us to do it. It says approve the proposed parking restrictions as set out in attachment A, etc., etc.
So that does set them all out.
That covers it?
I think so.
Okay, that's great.
Take it down from here.
Okay, any other questions?
And maybe, sorry, it's just a comment, but next time it would be helpful to see the changes. So you said there was what was given, something was approved in 2021, and now we've got what's here. It would just be useful to see what changed and how much we're, and is that in there already?
On the pictures, there's wording above the pictures, just kind of a little bit.
Okay, I just find it kind of hard to follow, but that's just me, my brain. Thank you.
So just to be clear, the diagrams do identify the changes.
The diagrams show what's there on the ground now, and the words show what was there previously.
Right, so the words do identify what the changes are. Thank you.
Okay, for me, yes, so the comment about rescinding, where was that? Paragraph 7. It said rescind. Yeah, all existing parking restrictions within the town centre are rescinded, but it's really only related to these particular restrictions that related to the town centre upgrade work, isn't it, rather than all the other parking in the town centre?
So it's just Appendix A from the 2000.
Right, okay.
I wonder whether we should, in the motion, that it should just say that these override previous restrictions in those places or something. I don't know, just something that's a bit more, because it's hard to, it's not clear which ones we're rescinding and otherwise and which one we're not.
Yeah, I think the resolution does refer to attachment A.
Okay. The attachment A is quite clear in terms of what's going in place and what's been changed.
I think that probably is clear enough, but I just wanted to get it clear in my mind that we're only focused on the town centre upgrade, which is the road. I noticed that the bylaw is dated 2018, which indicates that it might be up for review at some point. We're at 7 years after that now anyway, aren't we? So somewhere between 7 and 10 years it's likely to be reviewed, isn't it? The Brecon Street loading zone picture that shows on page 116. So again, that's just a loading zone. Doesn't specify that it's for goods service vehicles. It's for any vehicle to stop and offload goods and passengers. Are there any time limits? There's no time limit specified on this plan.
No.
It's just a loading zone.
Extra times.
Yeah, as long as someone stays with the vehicle. Is it all persons nearby?
Yep.
Okay, and I did also have a question about Rees Street. Because obviously with the colour coding, we've got mobility at the noted at the Shotover Street end, and then loading zone at the, as it carries on towards Ballarat Street. Is the whole street mobility and loading zone? So you can be either, yeah, all of that shared space is available for either. And then all of that applies to Beach Street as well. Yeah. Okay, there has been an issue with, you mentioned about taxis stopping and waiting in that loading zone on Beach Street, hasn't there? I don't know whether there's been any resolution to that yet. There was some talk about cameras not being operational under a different, no, it's not done there.
I think Andrew's been doing some enforcement. Yeah, I don't know the current state of that.
Okay. That's all right.
Slightly off topic, but did the loading zones in Cow Lane get marked up? They've been painted and all that sort of stuff? Cool. Is that helping things there?
I haven't heard anything further.
Page 119, so this is Man Street, it talks about the parking near the car parking entrance, where it says at all times, does that mean no stopping at all times, or is that,
That's free parking at all times.
free parking?
Yeah.
Right, so that's, yeah, I see what you mean, because that is away from the entrance of the car park. Okay. That's all right, so it's the colour for car, I take it. Too many colours for me.
Yeah, struggled.
Okay, no other questions for me, thank you very much. So the resolution then before us for this one is that the infrastructure committee note the contents of this report and approve the proposed parking restrictions as set out in attachment A, which includes existing parking restrictions which are already signed and or marked, and new parking restrictions which will be formally legalised upon approval of this recommendation and subsequently implemented and enforced. We have a mover for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillor Clearing, a seconder.
I've seen that, just for my parking.
Right, thank you. Conflict of interest? Right, any debate on it? Any further debate? So, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. No one against it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff.
I'll take it for lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Afterwards.
But certainly can.
Drive through.
Okay, moving on to item 4 then, travel demand management policy review. I'd like to invite Adrian and Tony to the table. And that's the morning. Yeah, ask you to present the report. Thank you.
Adrian is the author. I'm gonna let her do all the talking.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So this is on the travel demand management policy review. It was the first cab off the rank for the TDM business case, which was approved last year. The review consisted of an analysis of 23 different documents, 20 of which were QLDC ones, and various strategies, policies, or bylaws. The aim of the review was to produce a set of recommendations for each document, outlining how the TDM elements can be strengthened or incorporated to help create the mode shift that the district requires. So we'll emphasise that without embedding TDM measures into work streams and policies, travel and transport around the district will be constrained and not be able to withstand the level of growth. So various stakeholders were involved throughout the process, and following the committee noting this paper, the recommendations will be shared with all the teams and the document owners for consideration and adoption over time as the documents are reviewed or updated. So happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you. There's a couple of things I'm interested in. One was a TDM plan change for the district plan. What does that look like, and what are the, is there anything in the country like that where they've done a plan change, a TDM plan change?
I'm not aware of anything specifically on TDM. It would have been input to, say, the transport chapter and district-wide issues. The idea of this is to ensure that the district plan team, policy team, have an awareness of TDM when they now make those changes. What we brief the consultants to do is almost back to first principles. What would you do to have TDM put into the district plan now? You would need to go through a district plan process or plan change process.
Okay, so I suppose, well, firstly, that's the future of the district plan, and the RMA is incredibly uncertain. So I suppose we'll cross that bridge if that gets to it. But, you know, we've gone down the route of things like inclusionary zoning and stuff like that, which, while Noble have run into their challenges, I wonder whether a TDM plan change might be the same, whether it, well, yeah, whether it's the, I'm just not quite sure how you do it in the district plan is what I'm trying to get at, and I'm just sort of interested in that. But
if I could respond a little further on that, a lot of times we found with the policies we have, they are pretty good already. A lot of the changes aren't dramatic; they are just reinforcing what's already there.
okay. And you saw one of the reasons for it as being to sort of advocate internally for within different sectors of council, that this provides a mechanism to sort of advocate internally. Is that how I read that?
Correct.
And others. What do you mean by the and others? And yeah, and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah, so the idea of this tranche of the TDM program is about raising awareness and about that advocacy piece internally, first of all, to make sure that we are doing everything we can. But a lot of the discussion we have around travel demand management and behaviour change is really emphasises what does it take to put somebody on a bike or somebody to walk or change. What we've understand very early is it's also about the designer, the planner. And so we've looked internally to make sure our house is in order, if you like, before we do that.
Okay. And there's a number of other things that come in, so I'm just trying to find it, that basically that we use this to advocate to government for things that they've refused to give us over many years, effectively, to put it in polite terms. You know, including funding and mechanisms and, you know, visit levies and development contribution changes and whatever. So I'm just wondering, how does this change the case for those things when the case has existed for many years?
For us, it provides a consolidated piece of work to say these are all these things considered, but acknowledge that there are many separate processes to get those into the implementation stage. As you'll be aware, the NZTA funding, for example, really has taken away a lot of the opportunity under active travel because it's no longer there, it's no longer prioritised. But we feel if we have a consolidated piece of work here that we put to a council committee to understand, recognise the level of work we've done, we continue to advocate for those internal things, but also through Way to Go partnership and others. This is what TDM looks like. Well, this is the scale of what TDM needs to look like if we're going to effect the change.
Yeah. And I just wanted to highlight, and I believe it, you've noted it a couple of times, but that you note that basically the development contribution policy needs to change to accurately reflect the actual costs of development on the wider network. As all developments, even one additional unit has an impact on the transport network and should be recognised. I wanted to highlight that because it's something I've been hot on for a number of years, is that we need to make sure that the DC policy is picking up our transport program effectively. So yeah, that's what I've got. Thanks.
And again, this is a point in time review of policies. Obviously, since this has been enacted, there's a new discussion about development levies, which may make that slightly.
May or may not help us, yeah. Depending on which way it plays it. Yeah.
That was going to be my first question. Yeah, yeah, I was going to ask what the risks were changing from development levies to development contributions, but I assume there's not much sort of understanding, given that it's less around projects and more around the general fund. It seems to be the theme around.
I don't have a complete understanding. I've seen the ministerial press conferences and no more at this stage.
Yeah, for things like zoning, for example, like in Highway, they wanted industrial zoning so that people didn't have to drive into Wanaka. Would this help reinforce that sentiment in terms of how it changes planning, or is that more anecdotal?
I think that's very much the focus of this. I'd say it's a raising awareness, but advocating for council through all its various functions, land use planning being one of them, to consider what that's like for TDM. How do they consider? As we're going through projects at the metal programs at the moment under the spatial plan, we look at structure planning for the southern corridor, including incorporation of TDM measures is pretty important. So yes, it does have an effect, or can have an effect, on how and when things are zoned.
It's helpful reinforcement anyway. The report sort of mentions there's a lot of sticks without carrots. And that, you know, I guess there's a sentiment that Quentin mentioned about whether it's going to be effective, but is there an example of, you know, a meaningful carrot that could come with a strategic change from elsewhere? Or I'm just trying to think of what's the most effective pull in order to help that isn't currently enacted that you can foresee.
Yeah, the example we give is unfortunately as far back as 2017, 2018, when we worked with our partners to introduce the all bus scheme, the $2 fare, and at the same time changed a significant amount of parking throughout Queenstown CBD. That forced a change in an uptake in patronage of over 230%. I mean, those are the things that can be achieved. Have we got something more locally? Not at the moment, but one of the supporting pieces of work that Adrian is now tasked with is bringing up a monitoring report on all those changes. So we will look at the council's own survey results as well as other information built into that so we can see that change. So in the future, we may have more to report on the positive nature of those changes.
Cool, that's all. I should just double check.
Yeah, you talk about the dollars, well, how do you plan on spending the 100,000 per year on this? What happens now with it? Because you've got this policy, and I understand. I'll ask the next question, will be how you actually see it physically being used within the council. But 100,000, what do you expect that to be spent on each year?
So there are 4 tranches. This is only the first one, the policy review. We are scoping up the wayfinding piece, which is physical and digital wayfinding. We're then going on to travel plans and then travel management associations. So all those things may, as we've done in the case of the policy review, is we buy in services to help us go through that process. Okay. So these are for consultancy services as we need them. 100,000 being a capital project, we need to internally charge as well. So the amounts aren't huge. It doesn't run to a lot of implementation programs in itself. We had planned actually higher implementations when the Better Off funding was still fully available.
Okay. And with the review, and it's got a summary report with 4 general recommendations and supposed to for different departments within council. Now, when I look at this, you start glazing over and you start looking through some of these future pages. So if I'm a manager somewhere wanting to look at this policy and see what I'm going to be doing, have you got this formed into some sort of useful tool for managers to use, or they got to plough through all the extra wording and the tables at the bottom of the appendix?
No, I think they're high level recommendations for each team to work through its own workload. I don't think there's a separate one. There's a high level reference back to the motive plan, to the business case that put TDM program into operation as such. But no, it's down to those individual departments. But again, this falls back to a resource that any manager could come back to, look at those lists of what we could do, take all the other considerations they have to factor in and improve their documents.
Yeah, there's some of the things in here that the report writer quite strong, and it's really a timing thing. One of the recommendations is obviously around car parking. Do away with the car parking, that'll force people to a different form. But the timing wise, if you do that before you've got public transport, like in Wanaka, we have some issues. So I guess all that is this is a recommendation, but it's not a guideline, but not a policy that has to be adhered to.
No, it is not enforcing any other department to take any particular action. This is an advocacy piece.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks. Look, it's great, and I'm glad you asked for a bold approach and got a bold approach. Which is, yeah, and the report, I don't think it pulls any punches. It's very honest about the responses. So helpful, I think. My concern is that, sorry, I'm getting to a question, is that this is just going to now go from us into the organisation internally, and you will make of it, the various document owners will make of it what they will. And presumably you guys will be doing some sort of tracking, but I'm just a bit concerned that it's not, that it's not coming back to us for workshopping, that we don't develop an action plan and that there's not more leadership from the top, because that's what the report says. It says we need leadership. And so I'd quite like to give it. Do you have any concerns with the idea that, you know, we, from here, you maybe take the review, work up an action plan of the priorities and what could be done, and bring it back to the council so that the council can provide that leadership? Because I think there's a risk that this just gets lost inside the organisation, and it will never come back to council unless we bring notice of motion or something. We feel like it's missing a step.
But in response, it's only part one of 4 stages. We need to put all those together before we come back and represent that whole program.
So you're saying the other 4 pieces are the wayfinding, the travel plans and the TMAs. So to me, they're part of it. They're all mentioned within the review alongside other things like a plan change. You know, so why would we not at the front end take this review that's come from the outside and then have some sort of action plan so that it's deliverable? Like, you know, if there's $100,000 going towards it, we need to know what those things are and that they're the most important things. There needs to, I would like to see the infrastructure committee give some more direction and support, and to know what is happening and what the money's being spent on, rather than just hoping that it works out behind the scenes. Because there are some things in here. Sorry, I'm not really asking questions at all at this point, am I? But I would be keen on your feedback and to understand why you've not taken the approach of bringing this to full council and workshopping it. It's so critical to this district. We have to do this. We're on a constrained network where intensification is planned. Unless we do this, we're stuffed. Not necessarily all of it. There will be pieces, but it's, you know, there will be some bits that need to be done first, some bits needs to be done second. There will be sequences. To me, it needs an action plan because this is just a review.
I'm just referring back to
Yeah.
once the business case had been completed, we did bring that to committee.
Sorry, the business case.
The business case outlining the TDM program.
Step into an action plan.
Yeah, so, I mean, why would you do, then does that need to be updated in light of this?
So this is one of the actions out of the business case. So this is one of the actions, one of the.
It's just, but the thing is, the review suggests actions. And we are going, well, they may or may not be developed. Sorry, I'm just getting blank spaces. Is there any, I just don't understand why we're not.
So this is reporting an outcome of significant piece of wood. So this is what this is. We do have significant funding constraints. We've got some limited funds, but it is about trying to, I suppose, action some of these changes through the other various documents and processes and policies that we've got going. I'm not sure what would report back in terms of an action plan would require.
Well, I think it would take everybody, you know, if that work's going to be done on each owner of each document. You know, the district plan's obviously large, but I guess I don't want this piece of work to get lost. And to me, it looks like it could within the system. We're not even giving direction that every time one of those documents is reviewed, that this travel demand management plan must be considered and highlighted for the councillors. It could just disappear the way we're agreeing. I don't know why it's come otherwise.
It is to report a significant piece of work, and there was going to be significant funding provided that's not available anymore. So sorry if you think that reporting this isn't helpful, but that is the purpose of this. It is to report a bit of work that's been done and saying here's where we currently are.
Well, it's leaving it up to the document owners. That's what it's, you know, that's what the report says. I don't want to leave this up to the document owners. We need to lead it from the top, and that's what the review says. It needs leadership, because there are staff in here saying, well, we don't want to apply sticks until we've got, you know, the ORC on board and we've got those alternatives, which I totally understand. But if we're going to change that, it needs to happen at this level. We need leadership. This is an incredibly important piece of work. I just can't approve. I just can't approve the approach, because it's doing exactly the opposite of what the review suggests, which is to give it.
Disagree, but okay.
Well, the document it's in place, you know, it's there to refer to, it's better than not having it.
But,
Starting point, I mean,
how, are we going
yeah,
to?
I think the scope of what we're looking at today to try and. more
You're right, there
directly
needs to be an action plan, it's just as to who, to where it is owned, and I don't think this is the place for it to be
The full
owned.
council.
Well, possibly, but I don't think a review of the policy is the correct place for the action plan to sit, that the action plan has to sit under either the business case or under
Yeah.
another step of the action plan out of that, but I don't think it sits right here.
Where, and this is what I've suggested, is that, you know, I've sort of throwing around words, but that the travel demand management review be workshopped and brought to the full council for further direction, because, you know, we can't do it today, but I would like to see this in front of the full council. I would like to see a bit more understanding of where the organisation's going to take it, and what we need to do in terms of leadership to make it happen, so that we haven't just spent a whole lot of money that sits behind the scenes, and we've got it's sitting around this table, we've got no way of bringing it back. We wait for you to bring it back to us when you feel you know, it needs to come back, but I think we need to own this.
So, Mr. Chair, the resolution, we've got a proposed resolution, if you want to change that, but I don't know what you change it to.
I like it to be-
And this is part of an operational thing, there's some, like many parts of our work that we undertake, we can undertake and report back through regularly to the committee in terms of workshop, we're updating our projects and things, we can provide further updates, but I'm not sure what it is that you're after. Sorry, I'm just.
I agree with the sentiment of what you're trying to do, and I'm wondering if a resolution could be more to talk to the chair about a future workshop around travel demand management, or some strategy or something proactive in future that we can help championship as leaders. Like, that's where I can see, to take what you're saying and be proactive about, keen to, and share the sentiment, so we can definitely do that. I don't know if that needs to be structured in this forum.
I guess the question is there currently a next step beyond this? What does happen next?
So this was the kind of conclusion of the project at this point, or circulate the recommendations and.
But you said that, Tony said this was one of 4 benchmarks out of the business case, so what's the next business case step?
A wayfind. So we need to work through all those 4 tranches to form the main elements of the programme.
So what's the next of the tranches?
Wayfinding,
Yeah, so and then,
travel plans, and then travel management associations.
So what's the timeframe for doing the wayfinding piece, the travel plans and the TMAs?
To go through these, we're currently looking within this LTP period. So up to 2027.
before it gets brought back together, before
This is
only after all those 4 pieces are completed, do you bring it back to?
We can either bring it back as a whole or after each one, and as we've done with this first track.
It just feels like we are doing business cases and plans and we're not actually achieving anything. And I really would like to get things moving on actually getting stuff happening.
Well, I had the question before, but how is it going to be used by the members? So I got the answer that, yeah, it's there. So when the various departments and council are learned, and they're going to take, there's another policy they've got to take into account and recommendations to include in the work that they do. Is that correct? And so if we had an action plan for every department and council on how they're going to do what we want them to do based on this policy, we're starting to get quite detailed, and I'm not sure whether that's exactly what you're after or you're looking at a higher level thing, but I understand, Rob, we've got the policy on the table, it goes on for approval.
Let me.
If I'm in the transport or, sorry, if I'm Richard Powell, going to do something with the code of practice, then recommendations from here should be.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Given that we've got the code of practice here today, this makes recommendations regarding the code of practice. Has this had any influence on the code of practice, or has it been too late?
I think it's too late.
Well, the travel one I understood was happening next, more into the next part of the stage of the code of
practice. Okay, well, that
we're talking mainly stormwater and water today.
That might answer that question, is that this will inform the next review.
Yeah.
It's part of the review of the code of practice. Now, there's a bunch of recommendations around district plan too, and yes, like I said, I'm confused as how you do cohesive TDM, there are parts of it that could influence. You know, we've got special zones coming up, for instance. How do you deal with the policies and objectives in the special zones around encouraging TDM? Anyway, I think we're probably need to move on. We're
What about,
an hour and 40 and only on item
got a suggestion?
whatever, but
Can I just make a suggestion? We're gonna have to, the long-term plan, the next long-term plan will start to be developed in the not too distant future, and we will need to understand whether what we're doing with this and to be putting funding in for it, obviously. So could we suggest that we report back on this at a point in time so that it comes back to the table, and whether that's, you're seeking your advice on whether that's 9 months, 6 months, 9 months or a year, but we need, at that point, we want to understand what the different departments were doing and what funding they needed for implementation. Obviously, that's not with that, so it doesn't get lost, so that we don't miss funding opportunities.
what are you suggesting then? We've got 3 resolutions here. Are you suggesting we add a resolution, and what would it be?
Yeah, I just want it to
Okay.
come, I want it to come back to the table.
So what?
I guess part of it, just for me, is that there is a note there that says that, you know, it's not very well funded in the long-term plan, so there's not much money to do anything with it at the moment anyway. And the point there would be that
Next
as long as
long
you get a
term.
plan, that
We
you know,
need to prioritise it.
if it is, you know, something that council, whatever the council looks like at that point, you know, what they do, they need to prioritise it if they want to make some progress with it.
And we want to see which departments are prioritising it. We want a trigger for them to look at it ahead of the long-term plan and to make sure that anything that needs to happen, happens. But, you know, I think it should come back to this committee or to the full council within a year, looking at what the different document owners are planning for the next LTP period.
Okay.
Yeah, well, as a, sorry, I know, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but we've got to be careful what we put in the recommendation of whether our achievable, because the long-term plan's bigger than
We're
just.
giving them the option to decide what they would like to do with it. We're not recommending anything except requiring it to come back.
You just said,
to see-
well, they come back with a report on how they're going to action TDM.
Or not. They may decide that they're not going to, but then at least we see, and we can say, well, no. Or yes, but it means we retain some control over what happens.
So
We,
see the level of detail of reporting you're asking from that. I'm sorry, I'm raising a concern about our practical.
It's all right.
ability to do
Councillors shouldn't have any power to do anything anyway.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm responding to you and being cautious about our ability to do that.
I would hope that that's what it says it's going to do anyway.
You're
That the
asking-
different document owners are going to look at how they're going to, you know, work with it and incorporate or not the various recommendations. So I'm just asking you to report back on what it says you're going to do anyway.
Is requiring a resolution. That's
Well,
it's,
if it doesn't, if we don't direct it to come back to the table, it won't come back to the table.
Well, that's,
well, the chair can take some ownership of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it.
And the
interest-
reluctance.
In the interest of moving
I'm not
things
reluctant.
on, we need to come to a head one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just not sure how we really force that, given that.
I am, we direct it to be reported on in a year's time.
on the
Progress to be
LTP.
reported on in a year's time.
so just trying to help, you've got the option of asking for a resolution or amendment or. And
We need to pass the thing first, yeah.
So you've got the option, formalising that if you want.
Okay, well, yeah, I think for the moment, should we put the resolution as it is now, if you want to make an amendment to that or an addition to it?
Yeah, I try.
Do that. Okay, any other questions first? Yeah. Questions at this stage, but I'm not making a comment. So the resolution that we've got before us here is that the infrastructure committee note the contents of this report. 2, note the results of the review will be used to advocate for the improvement of travel demand management policies with internal teams and others. And 3, note that initial funding for the wider TDM program was reduced under the Better Off Funding Review. We have a mover. I'll move it. Regional second it. Any discussion?
I would like to make an amendment on the fly. Direct staff. And feel free if you want to pause if it gets awkward doing this, but I think it's worth having a shot. To report back on progress made by internal teams. By, where are we at now? Into March, what makes sense in terms of LTP timing? What do you think?
Well, LTP would need to be by September, October, probably,
Okay,
The following, not this year.
not this year, no.
well, I think we need earlier than that, so let's just give it 1 year. Yeah, so by first quarter 2026. It's quarters in terms of years, not financial years, but hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so my proposed amendment is, and happy to take suggestions, direct staff to report back on progress made by internal teams by the first quarter of 2026.
So
That would be 4. Oh, yeah.
Right, that's what you're moving, you've got to see it too.
I don't know.
Does anyone want to see it?
Well,
So, but I think it's, what I would say is I think it's worth a further discussion and we'll take it up with the chair. You guys can take it up with the chair's briefing on a way forward as to, at the next point. I just, yeah. I don't think we're quite.
So you're seconding it to have the discussion.
No, I'm not. I'm just commenting on it, that these guys can take it up. I'm not
you don't want
kicking
to
it.
direction, you want to.
I'm not kicking it to touch. I'm not kicking it to touch. I'm
It's
just
not
saying.
being seconded, so it's lost. Okay. The discussion then goes back to the
Substantive versions.
yeah, and your comments relate to that.
Yep.
Is that it's followed up with the GM, chair, deputy chair,
Behind the scenes, out of the public eye, yeah, absolutely, let's do that.
and then that'll lead us to a point possibly where it comes back to a meeting. Okay, so the only other things I wanted to say, just in comments in terms of the report, you know, I've mentioned before, I noted that, you know, there needs to be more funding. If we want to prioritise it, we need to fund it in the long-term plan. That is, I guess, a particular point that we as councillors have an influence on. I'd be also interested to know, you know, if you're looking at return on investment in terms of funding a long-term plan, what's the return on funding this work compared to the return on funding more infrastructure for vehicles and movement? And I suspect that the return on travel demand management will be significantly higher than building more roads and roundabouts. I also noted there was a point in there about, it was just an example of wheelie bins blocking footpaths. Frankton Road example was given. It is an issue. It's been raised numerous times over the last decade or so, and it's you know, given that it's been raised here, it's good to see that there is some work somewhere towards finding a solution for things like that. To try and encourage more, you know, other modes of transport. And, you know, in my mind, this is a really good report. It sets out lots of ideas of how to do things. That's now, and also, you know, the point was made about that the only consultation was with QLDC staff, but QLDC has a large number of staff that covers a cross-section of, you know, district communities. I think it's a really good place to start. If we can get things that work well for QLDC staff, then potentially it can work for the community at large. So, yeah, other things, you know, I think we also miss opportunities to follow the recommendations of the report like this. And one example stands out to me is right outside this room, there's a, you know, marking for the new Atira route where we've got cycling stop boxes that actively discourage you to turn off the new route, nothing to let you carry on with it. things like that, where if we're wanting to really generate a mode shift and get more people walking and cycling in other modes, we need to provide that infrastructure everywhere, not just where we think we want cyclists to go or walkers to walk. So other than that, we've got other comments, any other?
Yeah, just got a brief comment. Look, this is a really important concept that, and this report is a part of a much broader picture, and this is why I think we need to be clearer about what we're trying to report back or achieve or action on. So we've had the quits program, we've had the the public transport business cases, we've had the parking management plans and business cases, we've got all these things, and the point of TDM is that they all mesh together in order to and so it is really important, and in fact it's critical that these things they are absolutely critical to ensuring our transport network works. We've got a commitment to 40% mode shift in order to give us a functioning Frankton Road. TDM has to play a massive part of that. The discussion about MRT that's going on through the regional deal, the discussion around fare box recovery that's currently going on through government policy, all these things are absolutely critical to the discussion. And I do think that we need to give some serious thought to how they're reported and brought back together. I agree with your principle. We need to give some thought about how what's the best place to do that. So, yeah, and we can discuss that further. So, thanks.
Right, okay. All in favour? Against? Are you in favour or against?
Well, it just doesn't go far enough, does it? But yeah, I'm in favour in terms of, vote me, count me in.
Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Sophie. Okay, item 5 is Ballarat and Smoothie Street car parks. We've got Tony still at the table.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take the report as read, if I may, but draw your attention to paragraph 1 under context, and specifically to the second sentence there around discussion at the previous meeting, which is a full council meeting. Having been back through, this is anecdotal to me, this is information passed to me, wasn't at that discussion, and I checked back through the minutes reported afterwards, but I haven't listened to the transcript, so I'm not sure that discussion can be confirmed. So I would suggest that the second sentence in the paragraph is struck out.
Which paragraph, sir?
References retrospective approval of enforcement for the parking. It was agreed during this meeting that the council parking officers would legally enforce the changes proposed in this report for the temporary Stanley Street car park, on the understanding that these proposed changes would be retrospectively approved at a subsequent meeting.
Which absolutely did not happen. In fact, the opposite happened. We were talking about funding and Tony said, no, this is just for the physical works. Any parking charges will need to be agreed by another resolution. So
well, we've sorted that bit out. So that's been taken out of the report now. Does anyone got any questions for Tony?
John mentioned before about charging up to 6 p.m. This report just recommends making it consistent with everything else. It's one of the reasons we don't, the actual enforcement or the actual people going out and checking basically at night time, or is it a strategy?
I think there's a different process for later hours. We don't use our own wardens. I think we go out to a service provider for that.
Yeah.
But the discussion around whether we're charging after 6 comes back to really what's the purpose of having a parking management scheme or process. It's predominantly looking at making the network more efficient, reducing the congestion at those peak times.
Yeah.
So 8 to 6 is standard for parking charging. It can be introduced later. And if you need to have it specifically in an area to manage the network more efficiency, it could be after 6 o'clock.
That's all.
Think so. We're currently consulting on fees and charges, including car parking, aren't we? Is that right?
Correct.
So, shortly, okay, sorry, we've agreed to, well, or what? So is the $3.10 consistent with the proposed pricing or the current pricing?
I understand that's the current pricing.
And so will this automatically get picked up in the review of the fees and charges?
Yes.
And be in line with that?
Yeah.
And
So the just to be clear, the consultation on that is fees and charges from the 1st of July of this year.
so, and in terms of consistency, because we've obviously got a discussion around encouraging people to use the parks, you know, that the theory is the ones closest to the town centre are more expensive and as you move out they're cheaper. Is this consistent with that theory? Like, is this consistent with Boundary Street here pricing? Or is it consistent with Lakeview pricing or something in between? Where does it sit? I just can't recall the details.
Yeah.
So in the proposed change, this would go to I think the 650 proposed, because it's right in town, and there was a discussion at the time at the workshop, because originally this was going to be proposed to be, I think, at 350. There was a strong view that this was right in the centre of town and very premium car parking, so it was paid. And the proposed change, which is going to go for consultation, that's what that said.
Okay, so this is at the higher tier rate because it's close to the town centre, but have those been adjusted now? Sorry, I just can't recall all the detail. Has that now been adjusted, the Lakeview and the more outlying ones at tier down?
Yes.
Okay.
That's in accordance with that discussion.
With that discussion. But equally, that goes back to that point that the parking management strategy should further inform that.
Yes, it's
Okay.
part of it to do. So this, yeah.
That's all.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, just, given that we've just talked about the travel demand management review. How does that, like, you've had that since January, I think. Did we look at that in light of the pricing?
The parking management is really a subset of the whole TDM approach.
Yeah.
So we're working on a whole separate program for that, and that will take note of things as we go. The information for that was based on surveys over the last couple of years, not specifically on what's happened.
Okay, if we, would there be scope if we wanted to increase it or to change the hours that we were charging? Is there scope and the ability to do that today, or would that be out of?
Well, you could potentially, but I'd urge your caution about that. I mean,
Sure.
the reason for one of the reasons for the free after 6 is because of the very strong representations from the business community here about locals being able to come in after hours and park. So my suggestion, if you wanted to change that, we'd want to consult with the central Queenstown businesses, because that was a previous clear council decision on that basis. The future pricing of this from 1st of July is part of that fees and charges, and it was based on this being a premium spot and charging at that sort of premium end. It wasn't really set within the bit of my management, but it was reflecting this is to be a car park, and therefore what's the price charge appropriate for that car park in that location.
Is it slightly awkward setting a lower rate for a 3-month period? Shouldn't we just be, dare I say, just setting the expectation and just blending is that within our purview? Or
Yeah.
Or do we just bring it back at a step in time?
Something that's already in place. Yeah, my sense is you'd be better to seek the consultation on proposals through that process, and stick this to its current. That's my recommendation. I mean, because there may be numerous submissions around that proposed charging that you may want to consider from the 1st of July.
Yeah, sure. And just last one, can you remind me what's the charge at Lakeview?
It's $2.
$2.
Slightly less.
$2.50, so this is only 60 cents more right in the centre,
At the
and
moment.
Lakeview's underutilised at the moment still.
But also recall, this is currently out of action while the Alliance is doing their work. There's a possibility that it will come back on by Easter. There's a possibility that it might have been completed work, so there'll only be a period of relatively short period of time in that sense, it'll be available at that price.
And the, sorry, last question, the meters that are in town, around the streets around town, that's there for, is that right? I should know, but I don't.
I think they're $6.10.
They're $6.10.
Are they? I'm not sure.
I mean, there is some variation there.
So in the,
$6.20 for in town. Right, okay.
so this is very much reflecting what was at this stage, a temporary sort of quick use of that space, opening it up, getting it available prior to Christmas, which was done. And so if you're looking to change that, I might be would still be able to get it through that fees and charges consultation that's coming up, because you will get comments about that. And you may also get feedback around the 6 p.m. free.
It's definitely too cheap at this.
Yes, yes.
I was just going to have been a measure for next.
I was going to say a couple of things, but firstly, yeah, I think I'm quite happy to leave the parking charges as they're proposed, because that's just regularising what's happening there now, and then let it go through the process with the other fees and charges. The timing side of it, there was a period of time where parking was charged up until 9 p.m. in the centre of Queensland, and it was very unpopular, and it was reverted back to 6 o'clock for pretty good reasons. If that was to change for this one car park, I think that would be unusual and probably a little bit awkward. So with, doing it, if there was to be a change to 9 o'clock, then it would need to be a wider piece of work to look at the other car parks, and given that it's already been done and come back again, I think it might be difficult this year. But the other thing I noticed, paragraph 2 talks about the Ballarat Street car park, or its alternative name is Ballarat B, I think now.
Previously it was A, B and C.
Yeah, so now it's currently being used for a lay down area for the construction yard. I mean, previously, before it was used as a construction yard, it was a pay and display car park, I think, wasn't it?
Correct.
Does that designation for it not still just, does it not just revert to that once the contractor pulls out of it? Does it have to be?
Once the laydown area is past its use, it reverts to its previous use.
Yeah.
This is really just reconfirming that use.
Is it?
And sorry, just on the fees and charges consultation, we've now referred to this area as that, I think the Ballarat Street car parks.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be accessed off Ballarat
Ballarat
Street.
Street. Yeah, I guess the question that I have is, it says council intends to make these sites available for public parking with an hourly charge and chargeable hours, which align with the Stanley Street car park. But my question was, doesn't it already have its own parking charges and hours underlying the fact that it's now being used for something else?
Yeah,
But
that's a good point.
it would revert, which might be similar anyway.
Tony, just to avoid the confusion, there is one parking meter on Stanley Street, which slightly confuses it, but that's separate to this.
Yeah.
This is the area that's going to revert, the street in between, and the already constructed areas.
Yeah. I think we might be talking about slightly different things, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all those Ballarat Street car parks will be the same time frame of charges, which is the important point. And then the other question I had was, what's that question? Yes, I guess whether, the new car park on Stanley Street is really just seen as an extension of the last new car park on Ballarat Street, which is the QPAC.
Which new car park on Stanley Street are you
One
on?
that's currently out of action.
I mean, it's called it Ballarat Street.
Ballarat Street A. So we've got Ballarat Street A, which is the little one up in the corner where the QPAC rooms were. Then there's Ballarat Street A extension, which is the new one, most recent one. I mean, it is really just an extension of the other one, so small at the top of it.
Figure 2 on page 182.
Yeah.
Outlines those that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the intent would be that eventually, once the alliance is out of the laydown area, people tenanted in the Ballarat Street will be presented with numerous options all at the same price. Because that's all of the same effective location.
No, that's right. No other questions from me. So the motion or the resolution for us for this one then is that the Infrastructure Committee note the contents of this report and approve the proposed changes to chargeable parking hours and the hourly charge for the Ballarat Street car parks. The mover. To the seconder. Thank you. Any discussion? No. All in favour?
Aye.
Any against? No, carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And we're shifting on to the very last item, number 6, land development subdivision code and practice update, stage 3. Got Richard Powell to the table, the infrastructure development engineering manager. Which we presented, I think you've got a presentation as well you want to run through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brief. Brief one.
For the purpose of this report is to seek the endorsement from the infrastructure committee on the proposed changes to the land development and subdivision code of practice. This will allow the proposed version to proceed to the final step of approval, which is adoption of the new version at the next full council. I'll be back with you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Hi everyone, it's Kevin just said we're looking for endorsement today on the change made to the code of practice. All the information appendix and pertaining to that and the report and appendix to that, all the changes. What's not, I'll take that, so we'll take that as read. What's not included in there is any responses to the questions that came up from the infrastructure committee at their last update in, I wasn't here for it, but it was November, I believe. So I've got those questions that were posed on this presentation here. So I propose that we run through those first and then go through any other questions after that. Okay, the first one was around design storms in different areas, and the question, now these aren't verbatim, they were noted down in the link, but I think we've got the essence of the questions here. How will we address hydraulic modelling in areas like Lenore and Kingston? Investigations into providing area-specific rainfall graphs show that we need approximately 6 graphs to account for the variation across the district. This includes specific graphs for both Lenore and Kingston.
Which you just want to minimise completely the.
Undertaking the work to get these graphs and to ratify it into a position where we're comfortable to use them didn't fit within the timeframes that we needed to undertake this update. And we are looking to undertake that work and incorporate it into the next round of updates. This will mean that in the meantime, the proposed code of practice does have consideration for spatial variation of rainfall rates. However, these graphs that we would go out and get would make the assessments more accurate to those areas.
So is it like discretionary at the moment? If there was a subdivision in Lenore and it was being developed, you still had discretion to use what you understand about the rainfall rates?
Yeah, so there's a standard rainfall graph that you can add other parameters to make it fit better to your location, which is what the code code allows.
And is there some sort of internal document that I guess directs staff who are considering those things to do that?
Yes, yep. So there's guidance with so it's using Sam because you covered this point, but it was mainly based on the Auckland rainfall data and their standard, and then you can use that one to
storm profile shape, and the initial consideration of rainfall amounts and volumes is location. Location.
So
Within it,
making sure.
we're just further refining that in the future as the next stage of work. And the next stage of work, and with that, there's calibration and things like that, which
What time frame is there for that piece of work to be done?
That's actually the last question, but I can jump in there. We don't have set timeframes for the next round yet. We'll try and send this one off first and then look to the future.
How do you propose to split up the district into 6? Is that what you're saying? Is you split up the district into 6 zones and there's 6 different graphs for?
Yes, we focus on the development area, development townships and things like that. From what I understand, like the variation between Kingston, Lenore and Queenstown is very different, so they would require their own. Was it Frankton and Queenstown also different, even though they're close?
Yeah, it really, that's sort of something that we looked at in that process, just how different the shapes and profiles are between the different areas, and based on that,
so
you don't have any graphs to go, but yeah, it looks like about 6 at the moment. You would have that.
I mean, I think I explained last time, one of the problems is that there is a big difference between, and an example I used was Terrace and Monica, for instance, is that And then even Glendew Bay and Wanaka, there's a difference, and just depending because of the rain shadow effect from the mountains, it occurs very quickly and very at a very small scale in some cases. I mean, there'll be a different amount of rain in Albert Town than there is to Meadowstone or something, because
Yeah, and I suppose you've got to take a view that we're not going to be completely accurate.
No, and I'm not saying that's my next point is that we can't be completely accurate, but we also can't underestimate. So we've got to make sure that we err to the side of the higher rainfall, not the lower rainfall, which is gonna.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just we've got to be super careful with how that.
Yeah,
Interpolating data has been one of our problems in the past because they had done a linear interpolation between 2 points, and that just wasn't linear at all.
So I believe this will definitely help, and it's not always just the volume; it's the when that volume comes, whether it's front loaded or back loaded with the storm. Next one's again related to stormwater runoff concerns. Concerns have been raised about the calculated pre-development and post-development runoff scenario not aligning with real events, and it's causing flooding in a few locations. Do we conduct inspections during rain events post-development? So actually ignore that first point because it's talking about existing systems. So more pointed to your questions for systems invested by developers. QLDC require maintenance agreements, which specifically specify inspections following large events, and they also need to, at the time that maintenance agreement is finished, is to confirm functionality through inspection and maintenance records, and that's over a period of years. That's a current requirement, and it's not anything changed in the proposed changes in the code. Again, stormwater discharge of the feasible discharge stormwater directly into a river, and what are the treatment measures for discharging into a river. So the proposed code of practice requires runoff of car park areas for 10 spots or larger, also requires it for large roads, and for every other case, it requires contaminants to be identified and treated as much as practical. Discharging to water bodies. This is the second part of the question. Treatment measures can vary and be case by case. They include soft and hard solutions, being soft being wetlands, swales, hard being filters, underground chambers, etc., or a combination of both in a treatment train. Discharge to rivers do require some form of treatment in line with what the contaminants is producing from that catchment and the sensitivity of the environment.
Under the code of practice or under a plan?
It's definitely under the code of practice.
Yeah.
I think there's ORC consents requirements as well if it's a private system discharging to river lakes. So it's kind of that covers the river as well.
We have any filtration units for stormwater in the district?
No.
Yes, so a lot of them are on commercial sites, like one that springs to mind is the Banks car park, but that's a private before it discharges out to our system, which is required because of the sizing. Okay. There's a lot being put around the outlets at Henley Farms for discharges into the Willow Pond area.
Filtration.
Vortex separators, I believe those ones are, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to.
Because one of the problems we've had with that, yes, it's a great thing, but they require a lot of maintenance as well, and that our maintenance cycles are only really adapting to that. We've got to clear out mesh bags and mud boxes and things more regularly than we do. So.
And that's a good spin-off from the maintenance agreements we have, that we're collecting a lot of data on what it takes to actually maintain these systems.
The operation.
Okay. Okay, overland flow blockage factor, how can we ensure accuracy of our assumption from the overland flow blockage factor? Should it be default factor or determined on a case-by-case basis? What we've gone for in the proposed code is to include conservative default factors, but it also allows for reduced factors to be applied with the appropriate justification. Oh, I can't remember what you're looking at. I didn't realise there was another screen here.
I'm just staring into the distance.
Yeah. Thank you. Runoff coefficient, should we consider future changes to, I guess, to catchment such as deforestation when determining runoff rates of discharge? We've had a bit of discussion around with especially the resource consenting team on this issue in the past, and in cases where changes to land cover such as deforestation and any other that would increase the runoff, that certainly gets taken into account, gets mitigated as part of those works. The blurry part is when there's a upper catchment where this can happen. At the moment, the view is that any future potential changes to that upper catchment that's outside of the development we're looking at, there's no requirement to provide that because the activity that is undertaken on the upper catchment should be providing for that mitigation by increasing that runoff.
Is there a pathway to that? So you're saying if somebody, you know, if we have the reserve and we want to take the wildings down, it would be up to us to put some sort of stormwater system in at the base of.
Or do it in a staged manner that doesn't, you're not clearing the whole hillside.
Is there something that requires that? Because
I'm not sure.
But that's the problem, isn't it? I suppose, because yeah, it makes sense. But unless there's some trigger to require it in the district plan, if you're deforesting something, then we have.
Yeah, I suppose it depends if it's private and ours as well, because, and whether or not it requires resource consent. Because if it does require resource consent, then those effects would need to be assessed.
Yeah, unless it's controlled or you haven't got access or restricted discretionary and it's not listed in the matters of discretion or something.
Probably outside of the changes to the code, but I'm happy to
sure, no, it would
come
be
back to you on that.
to look at how the organisation. Yeah, thank you. Great to have these questions dealt with too. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And this is the one we jumped to earlier. Thanks for the roading updates. Currently, we've got no set time frame around what they'll look like. Like I said before, we want to get this water under the bridge, and then start looking at the future of what the roading updates will look like. We've also got a number of items that couldn't get completed in this round. We'll get to a point that we were comfortable to make the change, so they will also follow through the next round. Okay. And now, any other questions?
Any other questions?
We heard from Stephen before about the small scale versus large scale and there not being a definition and that becoming problematic for just wanted to give you the opportunity to comment on how you see that playing out and if there's scope to adapt it.
Yeah, there is some ambiguity there. I guess the attempt was to leave the door open for people with the survey and spatial certificates to undertake some type of work. It's very hard to write a line of where that will sit. So, I would be happy to have a look at the wording of that, but perhaps not the intent.
Well, his proposed recommendations to amend was just to remove the small scale and large scale reference in it. Would that be problematic, or would you?
I don't think so. If anything, that would. Oh, sorry. That would maintain what the current code requires.
Okay. So it sounds like everyone's going to be happy, which is good.
Just to follow up on that, there have been, I mean, the clauses do specify, you know, they go on to specify complex work. So I did think that the small scale versus large scale was a little bit, inaccurate, I guess.
In the line.
Yeah.
Small complex.
So it's complex work, and there's also specified works that do require chartered professional engineer input. surveyors as a profession as well, and a self-governing body. They've got their professional qualification requirements to go through, but they also will be covered, I imagine, by code of ethics, which will limit their work to areas that they have expertise in. And the code of practice also allows the council to ask for peer reviews if the work's significantly complex, I guess, or if they're uncertain about it. So there's all those other things that back up or checks and balances that are in there to catch anything along those lines anyway. So I think taking out the small scale and large scale wording, I think would be worth considering. Because the other wording that's in there catches the complex.
I did pick up the stormwater one, you distinguish between a complex and a simple by their size as well, and that's not necessarily the determining factor, is it, the size of the...
It's not solely the size though, so
No.
we tried to cover, if it's small and complex, then we tried to cover those in the other considerations.
Do we need to firm that up a little bit?
Yeah,
I think we need to put something into the resolution, wouldn't we?
We might look at doing something along those lines. Have you got some other questions? Did you have?
No.
And,
Just that.
Councillor Cox.
Oh, yeah, just, I was my sticking point was that what was even raised by anyone else was about the qualifications, because if you're willing to change the wording, taking out the small and the large, because the only other thing is, it's very hard to define, I guess, what's a complex development. I don't think you've got anything in the definitions on that. I don't know what's the tipping point of complex versus non-complex. Is there a tipping point?
We've got a number of criteria that you assess against.
Okay.
One is size, like just mentioned. The other is the amount of flow rate it comes off, whether or not it's like a diverse catchment that has complicated final concentration calculations, things like that.
And I guess when you're doing the criterion assessment, because in reality you have this new qualification in the surveying spatial design.
Yeah.
One again that gets to the whole idea of qualifications, that degrees and that versus experience, and the combination of two. It was good to hear earlier that in the public forum that the people haven't got the qualification, experienced people can actually now apply for that qualification, so that covers them both ways. Is that right? That's what I think I heard from the public forum. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So there's the survey and spatial. I think there's a couple of certificates you can get, but the one we're talking about is the land development.
New Zealand land development engineering qualification.
Yep. So at the moment, the way the code is written, that we only allow CPNs for the complicated ones, and not surveyors or people who hold the survey and spatial certificate. We're not saying that that's completely off the table yet. We just couldn't get to a position where we were comfortable to include it in the code in the timeframes we had.
Yeah, just to clarify on that one too. To that is the 2020 code of practice, which is the current operative code of practice, has those requirements for CPING. A subsequent consultation document started to add in those survey and spatial qualifications. We received feedback on it, considered it, and then so we've gone to not rule it out in the future, but just maintain the existing status quo in terms of the CPING requirements.
So with the that new one, the Spatial New Zealand Certified Professional Land Development Engineering qualifications. Have you got an acronym for it yet and put it into the definitions? Because all the other ones seem to have acronyms.
We'll leave next survey and spatial to come up with that.
Oh, okay. But it'd be good to have it slipped in the definition section. I had a couple of other quick questions. I've got to find the pages. Page 83 or 276 of the. Where is it? Sorry. It takes a while to get down these pages.
Press the button on the corner.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a quick one while he's waiting.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's been a bit of proliferation of above surface cabinets and boxes that I've noticed in recent times, and I sort of saw in the traffic signals one that you sort of enables that quite readily. Is there a reason why we enable that rather than push them to put them underground and contain those cabinets more?
Not that I'm aware of, having a guess cost, maybe, but, yeah, so I'm not sure what the driver is.
Yeah, I reckon we're seeing an unfortunate proliferation of above surface cabinets around the district.
Are you talking about not only traffic control, but like pump station control?
Yeah, all the transformers, all sorts of things that are above surface. That shouldn't necessarily be.
So
I'm
my,
sure it is, but I think we need to be mindful of moving forward anyway. Probably not that something will change today, but I do want us to think about it.
but back to my question was, it's come up a couple of times recently, and in page, we talk about, you talk about asphalt and chip seal now. We got mentioned to us the other day that the strategy, the policy was going to, all reseals would be chip seal, and then I said, we had one, I want to go to asphalt. That's what is confirmed. I didn't think that was actually correct. I thought the use of the asphalt versus chip seal, how it's covered in the code of practice, is it, how is it, have we got a strategy to go to all the chip seal or not?
Was that for council roads though, or?
Yeah.
Roads.
I'm just talking about, well, the code of practice, the first place it talks about chip seal asphalt, but we got mentioned to us in a workshop or something the other day, the reseal strategy was to go to chip seal. And I didn't think that was correct. I just wanted to confirm what the code of practice is actually driving for you.
It allows either. At some points, if you're having like a chip seal, if they do up the chip seal road over asphalt, we have to require asphalt on the intersections where the turning forces are there, and would rip up the chip seal. But at the moment, it allows for either, as long as it's used in the appropriate location.
Okay, the page 112, the thing, but 3.4.4.2, hot laid asphalt concrete surface, got a whole new section there in red. How different is this to what we're currently, when you get a whole section in red, how different is it than previously? Major thing, or just a minor tweaking and wording of it?
Well, if it's the, sorry, off the top of my head, I'm not sure of the details of that particular one. But if it's, there hasn't been huge changes in the road section, so I imagine it was just to update it to bring it up to updated standards.
Okay, right, cool.
And new names for the asphalt mixes.
Yeah, it happens in a few of the changes here, looking at the red stuff, sometimes the whole section is red and it's sort of just, okay, the last one was, I think, a similar thing.
Yeah.
No, I'm finished, thank you.
Just a couple of things for me then. Firstly, obviously you had some pretty good engagement, got lots of feedback, and obviously taking the time to engage specifically with some of the submitters, and you've taken on board a lot of the comments. You know, when you read through the list of comments and see how many you've taken on board, it's pretty impressive. So that's really good to see. We've already talked about this suitably qualified and experienced person definition and the requirement for them to do work. The other thing that sprung to mind, considering that, was that the change that was proposed for that came in after this, or from the submissions. So the people that were specifically affected by it, or the companies, if it had been in there for the consultation document, might have provided some pretty strong feedback on it at that point. To put it in now, after that consultation period, is sort of cutting them out from commenting on it, apart from submitting to, well, at the public forum.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that, we need to just look at cutting out that distinction between small scale and large scale, and just leaving it to what's already in there in terms of complex and specified works. The only other thing I had was, there's a little bit of confusion, or maybe it's just me being confused, but between the versions of NZS 4404 that are referred to, chops and changes, I think, a little bit in 2004 and 2010. So is this document based on the 2010 edition or the 2004 as the base document?
2010.
Right. There's still reference to 2004 in there, like on the title page it does as well. It's whether there was any need to just go and tidy those references up.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah, before it comes back to.
Take a look at that. You and update.
So anything, so there's not really any reference specifically needed to go back to the 2004 version, is there?
Well, that's what we check.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's different because the change between the 4 and the 10, we still want to cover the 4 in that particular point.
Okay, if you can check that, it'll be good. No questions from me. So then the resolution for this one currently is that we note the contents of this report and endorse the proposed changes to the code of practice as recommended in option 2. Do we need to move that before we can add something in about this wording, or do we?
Add something, yeah.
Just add something, yeah. So how do we want to deal with that? If we add a point 3 to review the wording of clause 1.8.3.7, whatever it was, in relation to small scale versus large scale, or take out the reference to small scale and large scale? To remove
reference to a small scale and large scale civil design work.
That probably convenience way of writing it, but yeah.
Yeah, that section 1.8.
1.8.4.3, yeah. Did you get that? To review the wording of clause
To remove, or do you want to like approve the removal of the following specific wording from section 1.8.43?
We can only recommend it for
Recommend, yeah.
Is that a procedure? I was going to say to review the wording of the clause to remove the reference to small scale and large scale.
Okay, great.
Review the wording of clause 1.8.4.3.
1.8.4.3.
Well, yeah, we're not reviewing it. That the infrastructure committee directs staff to review.
Yeah, prior to.
Yeah.
You know, I want to seek further advice on that before we sort of committed to that. I think we need to report that back.
We're directing to review, so if you've got any problems, you can come back, but
Yeah.
that's where we're.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's on the basis that it wasn't in the consultation document, it's been added into this draft, but we just reviewed.
But are you asking for that change, you're asking for us to review, because I'd want to get some.
We if we write direct staff to review
Yeah.
the wording.
Thank you. And report back, because it'll be good reason for that.
No, I was more in a position of we're endorsing it with that removal, because we were agreeing to remove it. I don't understand. So I'm not too keen on endorsing it without the removal of those words. We might review it and come back and say you're not going to remove it. I wouldn't endorse it.
In which case you could change 2 and just subject.
I just said recommended to adopt 2 with the removal of.
So what are the, sorry, can I ask staff, what are the implications of that, Rich, or?
It would maintain the current position of the code.
It was
The
consulted.
2020 code that's enforced at the moment. Well, that's in.
But in terms of practical implications for what that means in terms of what people can and cannot do?
It would remain the same as it is
Business as
today.
usual.
So, okay, so we're not having a third point, we're just expanding point 2. Endorse proposed
Option 2 subject to.
changes.
Yeah, recommended adoption 2 with the removal of
Subject to removal of small scale and large scale reference.
from section 1.8.4.3.
Chair, can I just join the conversation?
Yeah, come forward, Tom.
Yeah, so look, I think that we just have to consider that there is a balance here between the views of those that have submitted in terms of the chartered professional engineers versus this opportunity for some late consideration for your point that it hasn't been further consultation hasn't been allowed. So there is a balance of opinions required here.
Is that not
Part of the problem as well is that there isn't a definition of small and large scale, which makes it hard to enforce, so I think.
Yes, I understand that point, but I guess Tony's question in terms of that there may be different considerations still required. So we've got chartered professional engineers versus the definition we're describing here, and there may be submissions from both sides.
So practically,
In which case you need to go for consultation again. So what are you thinking?
well, this is then after consultation as well, so what is that sort of
I mean,
say in terms of the legality?
So
of it?
I agree with you with what you're suggesting. I'm just asking that you consider that there are two professional bodies here.
Yeah, I've read those, I agree with you, I've read both, and I've been following both of them. And you could say one side is lobbying to get more work, versus, you know, the whole thing. So I've taken all that into account. And I would move it with that removal of those things, but I'm not, I won't endorse it. That's not a threat, that's just a.
Oh, you're not blackmailing.
Could be blackmail.
The explicit wording that you want changed.
Yeah, so it's up to whoever's moving it.
With the removal of, for small scale and large scale civil design.
Should we actually two sort of about, so what page is that on?
It's on page 32 or 225.
Probably be more comfortable in reviewing, making sure there's no other implications from removing that further in the document. Is there an option to?
That's more,
It's tricky, I don't know.
what I was wanting to do is remove, in this clause, remove reference to small scale and large scale.
That's right.
Agreed.
That's what I'm saying.
Just reference.
One clause.
I don't want to write out the whole paragraph, strikeouts.
Remove reference to small scale and large scale.
So there's two sentences, one refers to small scale, one refers to large scale.
You're quite good at this. The changes that he makes.
John's doing that one off
Down there.
working in tandem.
So just going to comment on, so that's, with that, what you're proposing there, it will mean that it is, would be introducing the survey and spatial qualification, which is a shift from what is currently operative in the 2020 code of practice.
So what's operative, what is the 2020 doing?
2020 code of practice has the specific requirements for traffic, road pavement and stormwater to be a inch.
Right.
But this,
There are
it's not the certification that exists then, by the sound of it.
in 2020.
Yeah. Is this
Only changing one clause, one.
The sort of intention or the consideration that was had around the survey and spatial qualification was that it's sort of the hinge. It wasn't so much of a technical ability consideration, it was more around the legislative framework in which it operates, and that hinge is covered under an act which ultimately falls under MB, similar to the licensed astral surveyors falling under a similar Act 2002, which is covered under LINS. The survey and spatial qualification didn't fit under either of those bodies. And we would be the only council in New Zealand adopting that as a.
Right.
And I'm just like, yeah.
So what we're trying to get to is a sentence that says for small scale civil design, the council will generally accept chartered professional engineer and survey and spatial New Zealand certified professional land development engineer. We want to remove this word small scale.
Yes,
Yeah, so the civil design
That allows them to.
council will expect both of those, either of those.
It's the next sentence.
Yeah, a next sentence says large scale civil design complex. We want to remove the bit that says large scale civil design. It says, so it's either complex civil design or civil design related to the specific situations referenced below will need to be completed by CPH.
So it aligns with the complex and simple that we've got previously.
Yeah, there's enough wording there that anything that's complex or relates to the specified works listed below need to be completed by a CPE. And then anything that doesn't fall within those definitions or categories, the certified professional land development engineer qualification to be acceptable. It doesn't limit it to small scale, 2 to 4 lot subdivisions. But it could be a large subdivision, but it isn't complex.
That's right. And 2 to lot subdivision might be complex.
That's what we're trying to achieve here. We've got, qualified people in the district that have provided this work for a number of years. And this potentially cuts them out of work that they're qualified to do. Because we've decided that, that's the wording we want.
I suggest too that if this goes through, it's just a recommendation to the full council. And there'd be an opportunity in the main report if staff have any additional concerns since today and have worked through some stuff that they could be reported to the full council and then.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
So you want to change 1843 by taking out, so it would be.
We've got the wording there to remove references to small scale and large scale, or it could say large scale civil design.
But so we're clear, so it would read for civil design work, council will generally accept both qualifications.
Yeah.
For
Complex.
complex civil design or civil design related to specific situation below will need to be cleared by CPE. Okay.
So you're going to add in the civil design work, John, I'd put it in, just put civil design in between scale and the quotation mark for where it says large scale civil design, because that's the actual words that are on the sentence.
Civil design is after small scale.
And if, so we'll make that change and if there's any issues with that, council will come back to council.
We want to keep it on that part of the sentence line. So for civil design work, council generally, we still want to keep the civil design work in that sentence.
Oh, okay, yeah, so I've read from a different place.
So the next sentence.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, sorry, fine.
So I'm happy with that wording if everyone else is. Yeah.
I'm happy with that wording if you are.
They were all good.
Okay, right. So
Rich,
you're happy with that wording?
Yeah, just
Something
makes it
to-
less complicated and achieves the same thing, but it also, doesn't say that any large scale stuff that could be basic, to Gavin's point, would cut the survey spatial certificate holders out.
and there's still plenty of opportunity if council says that this is quite complex, we want peer review, or we don't accept this design, we want something more on it. You've still got that ability to do that, I guess.
Catch yep.
So we've got a revised motion now. So the resolution is that we note the contents of this report, we do endorse the proposed changes to the code of practice as recommended option 2, subject to removal of references to small scale, large scale civil design from section 1.8 3 of attachment B. I'm happy to move that if someone wants to stick it up. Any discussion? Thanks, Cody.
Thanks for all your work.
All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried.
Oh, well.
That
Thanks.
is the conclusion of our meeting. Ash. Just leave it to this.